What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is the second part of a story where Izuku rewound everything and was the son of all for one. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Now, let's get into part 2. Training commenced the day after. Everyone had the skills from before the rewind, but their body weren't the same. Izawa wanted to see how strong Midoriya and Kaminari were. Midoriya, Kaminari, Bakugo, Todoroki, he called to them. The four quickly trotted up without question. Everyone was now curious as to why they were called up. I want to see how strong the two of you are, he motioned to Midoriya and Kaminari. Midoriya, you will be going up against Todoroki, and Kaminari, you will be going up against Bakugo. Everyone wasn't sure if their teacher's head was on right. Bakugo and Todoroki were the strongest in their class. Let's see what S rank and SS rank is like. Izawa finishes, reminding the class about the fact that two of the students with the brightest smiles were actually villains. First up was Todoroki against Midoriya. There was no word spoken. Todoroki knew this wasn't going to be like the first sports festival. He was up against someone with multiple quirks. He could use any, and he'd be screwed in seconds. When Izawa gave the signal, Todoroki was the first to blast a glacier at Midoriya. Midoriya had disappeared but appeared from beside Todoroki out from the mist of ice. The red and white-haired boy stood baffled and quickly activated his left side. Midoriya dodged with speed. Izawa frowned. The class was confused why. The two were fighting equally. But little did they know, Midoriya wasn't using any of his quirks. Todoroki shot ice at Midoriya. The battle was reminding him of the battle with Stain. He was trying to keep him away. Panic moderately rising. Unlike the beating his father used to give him during his training, this was different. His father usually knew when to stop. The aura Midoriya was giving off spoke of certain death when contact is made. He created a large ice shield in front of him as he got ready to use his left side. Midoriya went head on, destroying the ice with a punch. Todoroki shot flames as a last attempt of defense. Midoriya ducked low, avoiding the flames and kicking the boy of his feet. Todoroki landed on his back, and before he could get up, a red sneaker slammed aggressively centimeters away from his head. A hand at his neck. The attacks were all over the place. The stronger and more power you put in only results in missed shots. Even though you're mid-range fighter, you should have some knowledge on close combat, Midoriya spoke. If this was a real battle, he'd be dead. Everyone was left dumbstruck. Izawa was still frowning. Midoriya didn't even use any of his quirks. Next up was Bakugo and Kaminari. No hard feelings, Pikachu. Bakugo shouted. Yeah, I'll have to show the real me, I guess. The battle between Midoriya and Todoroki was a 50-50 chance, leaning on both sides. A lot of them had their bets on Bakugo. All except Todoroki, Izawa, Midoriya and Jiro. She and Uraraka had been quiet for some time. After this, they together would have to talk with the villain teens. Bakugo was first to launch at Kaminari. Bakugo thrust a hand forward toward the boy's face. His face was straight and emotionless as he just simply moved his head out the way. The Bakugo, he was watching everything in slow motion. The smoke from the explosion hit the two boys. When it cleared, they weren't expecting what they saw. An instant win by Kaminari. Bakugo was flat on his stomach. His right hand was face down on his back. Kaminari holding it in place. His left was face down next to his face, being held by Kaminari's bootleg. The boy's other hand was on the lighter blonde's head, holding him down. Bakugo was in a dangerous position. If he tried using his explosion, he'd hurt himself. If he tried moving, he'd be knocked out in seconds with Kaminari's quirk. In fact, he knew if this was a real battle to the death, he'd be dead right now. Having a million volts blasted to your brain is certain death. Not everyone is Kaminari. It all happened so fast. Kaminari grabbed his hand and moved back, kicking the boy of his feet, slamming him into the ground by the head and then stomping on his free hand. He was waiting for him to make the first move. It was instant defeat on his part. Instant victory for Kaminari. Now hard feeling, Bakubro. But your arrogance will be your downfall and that of others. Bakugo was reminded by Kirishima and Kaminari's death. Don't underestimate your opponents with that. The boy flashed his goofy smile and helped the sandy blonde up. There's going to be a whole lot of blood, sweat and tears this time around, Midoriya says as he looks over his class. Kaminari walked up to him with his hands behind his head with a smile. We won't be going easy on you. Not anymore then, Izawa says, appearing behind them and then slamming their heads together, making them drop in pain. What was that for? The blonde shouted. The two of you didn't use your quirks. You said you won't be going easy, and yet you did, Todoroki added. Well, that's one thing, another, you'll have to make us use our quirks. You're going have to give it your all to make us use our quirks, so till the sport festival it's going to be hell. Izawa has tainted these boys, a certain skinny man thought, shivering in his boots. After the training session, Izawa, Kaminari and Midoriya picking out everyone's flaws, and then a battle between Kaminari and Midoriya. Kaminari put up a good fight, but there was a great distance between them. Apparently Kaminari hid some aspects of his quirk. 1. He could exert a larger, stronger volts than anyone thought he could. He had been pretending. 2. He can absorb and drain any electrical energy to recharge. UA lost power for an hour. Caused a panic, allowing Midoriya's victory when the blonde got distracted. When the two excited, they were stopped by Jiro and Uraraka. They went their separate ways with their partners. But Midoriya and Uraraka, they had gone to Midoriya's room. "I'm sorry, Uraraka," Midoriya began. "For turning into this." "Deku," Uraraka says softly. "I understand if hate me." "Izuku," Uraraka shouts. Midoriya looked up in surprise. "I can never hate you," she says in tears. "The first time, I used all my willpower to push my feelings for you down. I regretted everything when you were taken. I don't think I'll be able to handle losing you," she cried. "I missed you, Deku," she says, embracing the boy. "For 2 years, I've been feeling something that was missing. When you marked me, I felt as though I wanted to get closer to you. And when you were Kuro, I wanted to get close to you. I knew deep down they were you," she wailed and cried. Izuku held her close and melted into her warmth. He too began to let the tears fall. All Izuku felt like doing now was apologize. "I'm sorry," he cried. "I missed you so much, Achako," he cried as he began to tighten his hold. She had saved him. During the days he was held captive, thinking about her kept him sane. Thinking about her in Eri. He didn't want to think about his mother that time. She and All Might had met an untimely death together. Back then, as time passes, she and Eri and him had been spending their time together like a little family until his kidnapping. He gave back Eri's memories as well. The little girl stood by the door watching the pair cry their hearts out. Tears began to well up in her eyes as well. Uraraka saw her and opened her arms. The little girl ran into her arms and all three cried themselves to sleep. A certain pink girl took a picture. It was one of her treasures. She then turned tail to hunt down a certain redhead. But Jiro and Kaminari. "You can let all out, Kayaka," Kaminari said to the Ravenite. "You're a buffoon, an idiot, you never learned," she started as tears began to streak down her cheeks. "Why out of everyone did you tell me?" Kaminari had told Jiro that he was the one that was the traitor. He couldn't keep it bottled up for any longer, and so he told her. He told her he'd turn himself in and tell the pros everything. But he died before he could. What resulted after was the destruction of half of Japan when the two all-for-one users battled along with the army of Nomus. "I don't want you to die, Denki," she cried. "Please don't leave me." She couldn't stop the tears that streamed down her cheeks. It hurt Kaminari to see her like this. He cupped her face, wiped away her tears. He placed his forehead against hers. "I won't leave you, not again," he told her and held her close. The end of the first couldn't have ended any better. The next day everyone went about their day as though there was no war brewing. Midoriya still kept the act of being Akagami Kuranosuke. The student body knew him by that name. Class B hadn't been brought into the light yet. So yes, Monoma was still Monoma. And once again the classroom was surrounded other students, but this time around there was no talking or whispering. Class 1A vibe shut them all up. The other students thought they were in the presence of actual pros. Veteran pros that seen blood and death already. That indeed they were. Monoma's taunting didn't do shit to them. Shinsu remembered declaring war, Kaminari says with a smile. The purplinite blushes slightly, remembering how cocky he was. "Please don't remind me. Right now all I care about is training," he says, trying to hide his face with his hand. The class sat together with one of Midoriya's quirks. All others heard silence come from the table, even though it was obvious Bakugo was shouting. But Class 1A. "So you boss," Bakugo stopped. Looked at Eri. "So you basket brains are going to ditch the exam?" he shouted. "Not exactly, I have a quirk that allows me to make clones. All I need is exact measurement of the person and their DNA. Our clones will be here participating while we are off to the underground." "What's it like down there?" Mineta asked, sounding curious. "Everywhere you look is a criminal, murderer, hacker, cracker, broker, you name it," Kaminari states, his tone turning serious. "There are younger kids that are also murderers there. Kids don't have much choices, got no one to call family or friends. These types of kids are the types that turn into the most dangerous. And that is why I started the Drifters. I gave them a place to belong. The adults in the group were happy to help the kids. Even though you guys did a lot of shitty things, you guys are really heroes," Karishma speaks up. Iida had been quiet for some time. He was worried for his brother. "By the way, Iida, you don't have to worry about anything. We'll be going to host first to strike a deal with Stain." "What?" Todoroki and Iida shout. "That man has killed innocent people. Why are you trying to recruit a heartless monster?" We're also monsters, Kaminari says timidly. Quiet, I emphasized heartless for a reason, Kaminari-kun. Oh, sorry, he says and sucks away from Iida's wrath. The man's a skilled fighter and can take down a Nomu on his own. We've all seen it firsthand. Correction, you mean, you, Todoroki and Iida. Mina chips in. Midoriya sweat drops. Ah yeah, you're right about that. The deal is quite simple, join us or we bring you down, Midoriya says with a smile. Did you catch Aizawa-sensei's personality? Izuku Uraraka asked. Eri was sitting on her lap happily eating her food. Tsu-chan promised by the time the homes for their families on UA are done, she could play with her little sister. It still surprised a whole lot of them at how big the school was. Our clones won't disappear unless fatally wounded. They'll turn back into what I used to make them, so try not to kill his whole we're out catching, Midoriya states. Shut the fudge up, you fudging four-eyed horn basket head, Bakugo chastised himself because Eri was around. Everyone burst out in a chorus of laughter, leaving an angry Bakugo and a confused Eri. The day of the sports festival was here. Izuku entrusted Eri's care to Uraraka, Tsu-chan and Tokoyami. Their first stop was Hosu. They'd be gone for the whole day. There was always our place in every city or town where no one knew about. The two villain teens walked down dark alleyways, took seemingly random turns, and then took a couple steps down to a back door of an unsuspecting building. Kaminari knocked on the door with a rhythmic beat. The keeper of the door opened up the little slide to see who it was and almost dropped his eyeballs. The faceless leader of the drifters and Static stood behind the door. The man opened up to let the two high-ranked villains in. The building led the way to literally the underground community of villains. Or just plain criminals. Everyone around them was either some thug, a murderer, a petty thief, pickpocketer, and you can name it. They were actually heading to one of the drifters' secret bases. One had to go through the underground to get to it. They walked for a bit and through numerous tunnels. Finally they came to a dead end. A dead end to many but not them. The wall was a wall to many, but to them, since they had the drifter mark, it was a warp gate. It belonged to one of the adults in the drifters. An extremely wealthy woman who had built her company from scrap and some unspoken means. It was to take revenge against a certain hero and who had taken her family away from her. The hero was no more, and the woman was living her life as one of the richest villains within the country. Midoriya didn't know about her real name. All he called her was Madame Rift. The woman had many times tried to rip off his mask. The moment they walked through the wall, they found themselves in quite a fancy building. The next they know, the drifter leader is attacked and dogpiled by many. Boss Master scored, many shouted. Master? Kaminari questions. His voice sounded like static through his mask. Holy cow. The man that shouted Squirt shouted when he saw Kaminari. Static? What is he doing here? He was tall, black-haired and quite bulky. His lips reminded him of Satu, and Kaminari could see that his skin looked scaly. I'll defend the base with my life, the kid that shouted Master said as he morphed into a white tiger and stalked Kaminari. Calm down, he's a friend plus a new recruit for us. It was Izuku who spoke, but telepathically. Kaminari pulled up his sleeve to reveal the drifter mark. But Master, he could be a spy from LOV, says Daiki Shiro. The boy turned back into human. His eyes was ocean blue, hair whiter than snow. His build was quite feminine. Oh, don't worry about that, is no longer that. Izuku replied. Wait, so he was a spy, says the last guy. He was tall and blonde. He wore large goggles and had a white lab coat. Static is now part of the drifters. There are actually more recruits, but they won't be active anytime soon. The three took his word but still kept an eye on Kaminari. They walked to what looked like the common room. A large flat-screen TV stood into the center, and what was being shown was the sports festival. Would you look at that, Eraser? What do you teach your class? President Mick shouted into the speakers. I don't teach them anything, they just got themselves fired up on their own, Aizawa replied in a really bored tone. Bakugo and Todoroki are in the lead, or wait, would you look at that? Akagami just shot out from nowhere. Did you see that? The man took over instantly. Kaminari could see that Midoriya's clone wasn't using his quirks, but still, what happened to laying low? He blankly stared him, arms crossed with a raised eyebrow. What came first last time, what's wrong with coming first again? Izuku says, shrugging. Now I'll be first on everything. That part was not meant to be heard. And the first place is that man Akagami Kuronisk. Hey boss, why don't we make this kid a drifter? He seemed cool, says Tatsugawa Ryo. The man in the lab coat and goggles. Even that lightning one, he looked so cute. A girl that had always sitting there spoke up. Her name was Hanamori Yuki. In fact, why don't we make them all drifters? Though the Akagami kid and Kaminari ones first. I can sense they're not using their full power, says Shiro. As perceptive as ever, Shiro. But there's no need for the two to join. But why is that? Aren't you looking for members? The boy questions. Well, that's because they are already drifters, Kaminari told the lot. Master, how long have you known Static? The boy questions. Kaminari rings an arm around Midoriya and broaden the shorter boy for a bro hug. Long enough to know we are buds, he says joyfully. By the way, what's the time? Ingenium's attack could happen any moment. Why do you ask? We need to go do some hero killer hunting, Kaminari replies as Midoriya checks the time. Why, just let the man be. He's doing a favor by wiping out those fakes, says Shiro with venom dripping of every word. Not all heroes are fake. Take Ingenium for an example. Well, yes, he falls under our category for the real ones, but what does he have to do with anything? He'll be attacked today. Static, let's go. And just like that, with on the other hooded villain, they were gone. The Y didn't question their leader. Only our select few knew of him. Though not everything. They went back to watching the sports festival, then they realized something. We have drifters in UA. Ingenium was currently hunting down the hero killer Stain. What he wasn't expecting was running into 2 more villains. He heard about them and was told not to engage them, but as a hero that was his job. Boy, is this where the guy is going to be? Static asked. Ingenium was hidden behind a wall listening on the conversation. Well, yeah, this is where Iida said he was attacked. Faceless spoke. Ingenium eyes went wide in horror. From the looks of the villains, they looked to be teens, and if they were, then they would be talking about his brother. We have to take Stain down now so not to repeat last time. Ingenium watched as the drifter rubbed his neck. Last time Stain was going easy on us cause we were kids. Me, Iida and Todoroki almost got killed. Iida Tensei was now questioning about how the villain knew his brother and why he was speaking. He couldn't take it anymore. His brother was probably in danger. Don't move, villains. He shouted, jumping out his cover. Midoriya never got the chance to see the Turbo Hero in action, so yes, he was hyped to meet him. Turbo Hero Ingenium, it's a dream to meet you. Oh, thank God you're still okay. We didn't see you around and got worried. Iida really looks up to you. Kaminari chops Midoriya on the head. Idiot, you're still in villain mode, he says with the same tone he uses to annoy Bakugo. Midoriya slumps and finds himself in his own Tamaki corner. Mushrooms begin to grow on him as he sighs heavily. Of course I'm a villain. I hate you all for one. If only I wasn't. I can't go back again, I'll go completely blind, plus I have to wait to the same exact moment to go back, he mumbled. Anyway, Ingenium-san, we are here to save your life. Just then Kaminari phone begins to ring. He answers it, ignoring the completely confused hero. Hello? He says. It's hello. Kaminari-kun, and have you guys met my brother yet? Please tell me you did. Is Stain there? Tell my brother about his quirk. And why are your clones going all out? Also, Bakugo is up against your clone. Then you, what is going on here? Ingenium shouted. Nai-san. Iida shouts. Kaminari is sure his eardrums are due to burst. Put Bakugo on, then it will burst. Fudging Pikachu, I'm going to make calamari out you, Bakugo shouted. Fudging? Eri must be around. Are fake and 2 more scum of society, a deep raspy voice came. In an instant Kaminari and Midoriya stood in front of the Turbo Hero. The hero still confused about what exactly is going on. This wasn't going to be like last time. This time Midoriya was going to go all out with Stain. Izuku overestimated himself. He was currently paralyzed and Kaminari and Ingenium was defending against Stain. He should have seen through this. But he was getting a bit too cocky. Midoriya, you okay? Kaminari shouted. Yeah, just can't move, the fully landed teen replied. I don't know why you both are helping me, but thank you, I'm still arresting you when we're done, Ingenium shouted to them. Don't let him see your blood. His quirk is called Blood Curdle. If he digests your blood you'll get paralyzed. Interesting, how do you know my quirk? Stain asked as he threw knives at Izuku. Note. Izuku still has some trouble trying to control his quirks. He only knows how to use a few, and as a result is currently defenseless. Ingenium rushed forward and threw himself in front of the boy. Ingenious. Izuku shouted. I'm alright, the blades didn't go that deep, the pro struggled to say. The knives were cutting into his skin and bleeding, but thanks to his armor, it didn't go that deep. You brats may be villains, but I can still see your kids. And as a hero I gotta protect you. How admirable, but there's only one true hero, and only he can bring me down, Stain shouted and launched. The knife launched past him. He only tilted to dodge, but by instinct he leaped back, mildly missing being shocked by what looked like a thunderbolt. Get the hell away, Stain, Kaminari shouted. Ingenium, you and Kaminari should stay back. Izuku was starting to be able to move again. His quirk is at a disadvantage with those with blood O types. His paralysis is weaker, going in the order of A, AB, B and O. Stain was starting to get agitated. How did this brat know his quirk and weaknesses? He had been having problems with drifters because they knew this fact, and now it is revealed that the leader, a high school boy, was the one who told them. At the sports festival. Iida was worried for his brother. It was around this time that his brother was attacked. But he knew his friends would save his brother, right? No, he has to save their clones. Before in the first match, Kaminari had lost to Ibara-san in Class B. Now his clone had taken her down. They had mixed it up and Kaminari was now facing up with Bakugo. Knowing he wasn't real, Bakugo really wanted to kill him as revenge for pinning him down instantly in the training exercise before. Iida got worried and decided to call them. Kaminari didn't pick up this time. Midoriya didn't either. And so he called his brother. "Then you not now. Just die already," Stain shouted. "Idiots are the ones that live the longest," Kaminari shouted. "Static, this is not the time for puns," shouted Ingenium. "Faceless behind you." "Not again," Midoriya shouted. "Midoriya, are you a blade magnet?" Kaminari, Static, Ingenium and Midoriya shouted. "The clown's gonna go first," Stain proclaimed. Iida had a clang of blades. "Techmate," said Kaminari calmly, and the crackling of electricity was heard. "Damn it, stop jumping around like some freaking Spider-Man." "Would you stop making puns?" Midoriya shouted. "I at least got him." "This isn't the time to be looking away," Stain called out. Piro burst. Iida swore he heard bones break, and so that was where he ended the call. He had a slightly horrified look. "Is everything alright?" Kirishima asked. He had heard everything. "I'm not sure, Kaminari is cracking puns, Midoriya is a magnet, and my brother has become Present Mick." "Why are you making a life or death situation sound like a joke?" Kirishima asked. Back in the alley. Ingenium had rammed into Stain. He still wasn't down. Stain slashed at him, but Ingenium jumped back. Midoriya had gotten back up and used one for all, kicked him in the ribs. There was a couple more cracks, and then there was Kaminari. Stain literally bumped into him. Let's just say he got shocked enough to be sent into a coma. "Now that's over, it's time to take you both down as well," Ingenium says, getting into a stance. "Hold your engines, Turbo," Kaminari says. "I swear to whatever god that is still on our side, I will make Jiru gut you," Midoriya loomed over to the blonde. "No, please, anything but that. I love her, but please, she's the scariest thing on this planet. Right now we were in a bloody life or death situation. If that's not scary, then there's something wrong with you. I can't wait to see your face when you make a Chaco mad," Kaminari says with a close-eyed smile. "I am starting to wonder if you boys are really villains," asked Ingenium. He had Stain wrapped up pretty tight. He had also called the police. Midoriya's phone began to ring. "Hello? It's hello, Midoriya-kun. Stop becoming like Kaminari. Is my brother alright?" Ingenium takes the phone from Midoriya. "I am, and now explain to me why you are associating with villain." Tensei Iida was currently mad. "Nai-san, thank God. It'd be best not to arrest the two. Nezu says to come to UA, and everything will be explained. Forgive me, brother, but I cannot disclose the information using the phone. You may get your answers from Midoriya-kun, who is faceless, and Kaminari-kun, who is static, if you wish, but I believe you won't believe them. Also, your clones have been destroyed, luckily no one saw." Midoriya and Kaminari sighed. "Thank you, Tenya, for the lengthy speech." Tensei was sure that he was doing his robotic hand movements. "By the way, how's the sports festival?" Bakugo-kun had demolished everything. "Why that doesn't surprise me," Midoriya and Kaminari says. Tensei then remembered his younger brother's classmates. He had talked about a green-haired one and blonde, but didn't know their faces. Faceless was completely faceless at the moment, but Static had what looked like gas mask. But when he spoke, his voice sounded like it was coming out from Static or so. Only the upper part of his face could be seen, as well as the blonde hair. "Nezu will explain everything, so come by when you're done. We have other business to take care of." Kaminari then whispers something. "He gets healed and put in chains first," Midoriya replies. "Well, by Ingenium," Midoriya says as he puts a hand on Kaminari's shoulder. Wait, but Ingenium was too late to catch them. Drifter base. The four drifters was still watching the festival when their leader and Static came back. Wounded and bruised. Well, Kaminari anyway. Izuku ND regeneration quirk. Which was the reason why he had been struck so many times. He had thrown himself in formant of Ingenium and Kaminari so that they wouldn't get paralyzed. "You're back and you're beat," says the black-haired scaly one. His name was Kurabayashi Guda. The explosion won the sports festival, and Dever's brat came second. "And that one like Ingenium and the one with the bird head came third," says Hanamori-san. "They all would make fine drifters," says Shiro. Midoriya and Kaminari were on the floor. "I wonder what happened to the black-haired and glasses one and the blonde with the black streak," asked Ryo. "They're not in the crowds. They are lying on the floor and not wanting to get up," says Midoriya and Kaminari together. All turned at what was spoken, and for the fact that this was the first time they have heard of their leader's voice spoken and not telepathically. "What?" they shouted. "Master finally lets us hear his voice," says Shiro as he is on his knees praying to some god. Hanamori was squealing, and the two adults smiled. knowing their young boss had finally warmed up enough to speak to them normally. "These are some interesting people," Midoriya says Kaminari. "Have you met outclass?" Izuku retorts. "Master, we still need an explanation. What do you mean you two were the students at UA?" asks Shiro. "We've known each other long enough, so I guess you knew who I was," Izuku says as he takes off his mask. "You're the Akagami Kurinus," Groi says, surprised. "Well, actually I'm really Izuku Midoriya," Izuku says with a smile. "Are you saying you were that quirkless kid that went missing 2 years ago?" asked Guda. "If you're telling us this means that something big is going to happen where we're going to have absolute trust in each other," says Shiro. The others looked at him with wide eyes. "As always, you are perceptive," Izuku says with a sigh. "Madam is not around right now, so I'll brief her and the rest later. Let's just say that we have already lived through this time," Izuku says, turning serious. He had walked and looked out the window of the tower they stood in. Everything looked so small. A mentor of everything in ruins with smoke and dust filling the air played his mind as fire and carnage raged. Back then he had been running on pure instincts and adrenaline to fight against All for One. Now he had no idea what to do. The others except Kaminari looked at him confused. "But everything is different. We all are villains for a reason. To protect our family." Guda looked down in shame. "Because we wanted to be something more." Hanamori looked away. "Because society didn't treat us right." Ryo grew a scowl. "And because of the blood we share." Kaminari clenched his fist, as did Shiro. "I formed the Drifters because I wanted to create a place where we could belong and help some others turn away from the paths we have walked. We're murderers and monsters. Those things won't change. The first time around many of us didn't have chances and ended up doing wrong things. That's why I turned everything back and took everyone's memories." The Drifters looked at their leader in shock. "What are you trying to say, boss?" asked Ryo. Izuku pulled out his locket and showed it to them. "I have what you could call a time travel quirk. I had rewind everything so that I could restart and help others restart." "Don't you all ever have an inkling feeling that something is going to happen?" Izuku asked. Everyone nodded. "Those are the memories of the previous time that you lived." All for One had escaped and laid waste to half of the country. The other All for One user tried to stop him, but without knowing the great force of his powers, he too laid waste and was unable to defeat him. Izuku clenched his fist in guilt and looked down. "Wait, there are 2 All for One users," says Ryo. "That's insane. All Might against that villain had already caused enough damage, and that was only in one city, and you're saying these 2 destroyed half the country. It won't happen again, and this time I'll make sure of it," Izuku says, clenching his fist and looking up to the older blonde. "Look, boss, I know you want to do something, but All for One is a monster and you can't go against 2 of them," the older man says, worried. "Is not against 2, he's going against 1. But that 1 is more experienced, and so his training," says Kaminari as he takes off his mask. "Boss, is he saying you are the other All for One user?" Hanamori asked with wide eyes. Her hair was vibrant green with flowers blossoming in her hair. Her skin was dark and her eyes were ruby red. Izuku simply nodded and looked at his hand. "The war is coming and we need all the help we can get," he begins. "If you're looking for recruits, then we'd be happy to round up some more folks. But I'm giving you all the choice to leave," Izuku finishes. "Boss, I don't know about the others, but we'd never leave," says Ryo, hugging the small teen. He pulls away and smiles. "You gave us a place to belong. Many of us don't have families. And we found one by joining Drifters. This symbol we etched onto our bodies is the symbol of family to me." Ryo saying something so cheesy. Hanamori squeals in delight. Izuku smiles with new determination in his eyes. "Round up everyone, it's time they see their past," Izuku says, and all others obeyed, and in the blink of an eye they were gone. Kaminari was left staring in awe. His thought of the Drifters was that they were really cool. All for One Pav. "I found quite interesting. I never knew reawakening that boy's quirk could hold so much potential, and also none. Izuku is now a failed project. I had high hopes for him, but I guess he can't be tainted so easily. At least I still have Tamura. Oh, how I enjoy this drama. I wonder what All Might would do. Tamura is the grandchild of his master after all. My child against her grandchild. I would love to see his face." I took back Tamura's and Kurogiri's memories and gave it to them. Tamura was quite mad. He was now hell-bent on killing Kaminari, our now little traitor, and my son. I don't mind really. I like Tamura more. Even though his sword in my pawn. Well, he was more to me than any other thing. Me having a child was only an experiment I wanted to see. Would the child have one of the quirks I have? Or would the child be quirkless? Or would the child have All for One? It seemed the last was the result. It was a magnificent creation. I let the child and mother be to see if he would notice. But the quirk had been remaining dormant until One for All matured in him. How else was he able to use the previous user's quirks? From my little brother all the way to my son. It in quite a comedic ride. All Might should have ended me when he had the chance. Now I'm going to destroy everything he cares for. I can hear Gigantamachi going up against Shigaraki. It may be harsh and may be torturous, but that's how I brought the boy up. Making him believe he murdered his family even though it was just an accident because he didn't know how to control his quirk. Of course I took a little part in that stage of his life a bit. Making sure no heroes came to aid him had played off well. He was becoming more and more of my ideal successor. I just have to make sure he doesn't come in contact with Midoriya Izuku. No, Deku. That's what he calls himself. Deku. It suits him well. If he's anything like my brother and all his followers, he'll try to save Tinko. What he deems evil are those like me he destroys. Tinko Shimura. He was a victim. Of course he'd try to save him. The doctor has been very busy these days. We now have twice or more of the number of Nomus. The doctor has to do some tinkering with me as well. I even gave back the memories of his little friends. All of them came crawling back to him. All of them. His little gang that went to destroy the little camping trip. I wish I got my hands on a quirk that allowed me to see the future. I can block out All Might's little sidekick from getting an advantage. I could easily take his quirk, but then where would be the fun after knowing the outcome? Izuku Pav. The number of drifters had grown. Everyone was in their gear and so no one knew who was who, but their drifter mark stood out proudly. Glowing in the color of their aura in the dark. That's the difference between the real and a fake. Madame Rift came up to me and looked down at me. Her blonde hair framed her face, a black eye patch covered her right eye. Her left was startling gold and the white of her eye was black. You better have a good reason for calling the whole lot here. Her voice was that of a stern mother. Don't worry, it won't take long, I think, I replied. I'll let it slide once you tell me who you are. I'm Izuku Midoriya, I say happily. I left the woman dumbstruck in place and went and stood in the center of the warehouse we were located in. We had gone through another warp gate and this was the place where we had briefing and stuff like that. The day at this moment was time to reveal the truth. You all are probably wondering I called you all here. Everyone didn't say anything out loud. Just the occasional murmuring. It's time I told you all the truth. About who you are. What's going on, boss? Leader, what's happening? Spill it out already, short stuff. A lot of them began to question. There's our war coming. But that everyone went quiet. With the heroes. Not with the heroes. But against All for One. We may have to work with the heroes. Like hell we would. Why should we? They didn't give a damn about us. Everyone shouted. I could understand how they felt. Maybe growing being bullied wasn't such a bad thing. I knew how to relate. As everyone began to rage, I knew they weren't going to calm down on their own. But the single click of my fingers was followed by a deafening frequency. Everyone closed their ears and then when it subsided there was silence. I know you all don't want to, but we may not have much of a choice. I don't know when or where, but the puppeteer of the league will strike and all hell will break loose. I took out my lockets and released their memories. As the little glowing lights entered each and every single one of them, as well as those that were not here yet was listening, they doubled over as the rush of memories came back to them. We're all going to die. My family. No. Master, what was that? Everyone began to panic. As they cried, stood frozen in place or look on with horror. That was round one. Everything that you saw was what you could call a past life of a sort. Why everything is different? No, is because I turned back everything. Or rewind. I explained. Everything that you saw have already happened. The outcome was not to anyone's likening as half the country was destroyed. And that's the reason why I say we have to work with the heroes. Everyone was quiet and this time they finally listened. The war is between All for One and those who wish to protect what they cherish. I am not forcing any of you to fight. In the first round it was just All for One and second holder that battled and laid waste. There are two All for Ones, many shout. I think I may be going deaf soon. Is this how Izawa-sensei feels everything his around present Mick? This round he will have more of the monsters known as Nomus and also other villains. They're making and building their army. I don't know when or where, but they will strike and we have to be ready. Why not join them, someone asked. Many turned and glared at him. The league had been around for a while and their members did some shitty things to them. Plus most of these guys thought of the drifters as family. I wouldn't if I were you. They will turn you into a Nomu. Everyone stared at me with horror. Last time it was half the country. This time around, I don't know. It may be the whole lot of us and then possibly All for One will carry on with his ultimate goal. And what is that, boss? Complete domination and destruction of everything we hold dear and love. I'm not going to force you to fight. I'm in. Boss, did you think we'd let our home destroyed? We're going to destroy those suckers. Ain't nobody going to mess with my drift. The crowd shouted. I couldn't help but tear up a bit. These guys were just like me. When the battle begins I'll end it quickly. I'll try and save everyone, but I know I can't save them all. After arriving back at the dorms, both Kaminari and Izuku dropped at the doorstep. They were exhausted and aching all over. Fighting Stain was no easy task. Even if Izuku had the regeneration ability, energy and stamina was taken to heal, of course he was tired. They just wanted to lie there for a couple hours. Sadly, the others were already at home. Mineta was the first to see who had dropped at the front door. Still not used to the fact his classmates were villains, he screamed. They were in their villain gear. Then the others came. "Oh, it's just Deku and damn Pikachu," Bakugo said plainly. "Water?" Kaminari begged. "Food?" Izuku begged. As they laid there. Just then Kaminari got what he wanted as a bucket of water was poured all over them. They jumped at how cold it was and shrieked. They turned to see Ingenium. "Oh hey there," Kaminari said sheepishly. "Did they explain yet, or were you waiting for us?" "Just hurry up and explain before I think about calling the police," the man said sternly as loomed over the two. The two backtracked in fear only to hit another tall looming figure. They turned and almost screamed as they saw their scruffy-looking teacher was glaring at them. It was in the middle of the night after all. "Hurry up and explain and let us all get some shut-eye," he growled. Eri was asleep in his arms. Mina and the other girls were squealing at the scene. "Wow, Shouta, you became a fine dad," Tensei Ida teased. "I hate kids," the grump replied. "You say that, but you're always followed by now 22 children," Tensei stated. "But these two need to do some explaining," he said, knocking Kaminari and Izuku's heads. They started off with Izuku giving back his memories. Ida Tensei was dumbstruck. Right now he would have been in the hospital in a paralyzed state if it weren't for Theses too. Izuku explained the situation and the upcoming events. He told them that the drifters have gone out to look for more recruits and also train themselves. Izuku wondered if they could train in UA. With all the facilities that could be used and all. Class B was invited and had been told the truth. Some looked horrified and some remained as who they were. "So you're saying that Class A has villains in their class? What a pity it truly is, hahaha. It just means Class B is better," Monoma proclaimed, then was knocked out by Kendo. "How did we end up together?" she asked herself. After gaining her memories, she was dumbstruck at the fact that two became a thing. "Maybe because you're always there," says Momo as she chuckles. Todoroki not far from her side. The atmosphere wasn't dense and everyone felt calm. Maybe because they were trying to deny the fact that two of them were villains. They were trying to swallow the fact. But the atmosphere was still calming. "I wish we could always be like this," says Asui as she leans onto Tokoyami's shoulder. The boy tried to stifle a blush but failed. Everyone laughed and then the room got a bit more energetic. "Okay, since tomorrow we might be training till we drop, let's not let this night go to waste," Karishma proclaimed. "Yeah, that's what a man would do." Time skip. Due to all the stupid things they did, neither class was getting up for the day. Azawa didn't know whether to be glad or mad. Vlad King, who was with the students, was also passed out. Azawa just decided to make breakfast for himself and Yuri. He thought everyone was asleep. Well, many of them were in weird positions all over the place. But some were holding on to each other in their sleep. Ashido and Karishma, Asui and Tokoyami, Hagakure and Ajiro, Kaminari and Jiro. Todoroki and Yaoi Rozu were facing each other. Some of them weren't around. He wondered where the other were. The moment he entered the kitchen he almost choked. Izuku sat there looking like the dead. "What happened to you?" he asked, sighing. "They wanted to train last night and used me as the villain. Using a lot of quirks is taxing," he said simply. "Well, that makes sense," he says as he pours himself a cup of already made hot coffee. "It's common sense," Izuku replies. "Honestly," Azawa says, raising an eyebrow. Izuku looked at him confused. The older man let out a sigh and looked him dead in the eyes. "There is no longer anything in this world called common sense. I won't even be surprised if there are multiple universes and there are currently greater beings watching us. Actually there are, Author-san has seen many and they are watching us," Izuku says, calmly breaking the fourth wall. Azawa just face palms. He is so done with this and is currently glaring at whatever is looking down on him. If Izuku time traveled, then of course he had seen some things. Anyway, back to it. "Sensei, you're going to be playing a big part in taking down All for One," Izuku calmly tells the man. Azawa looked at him with a slightly surprised expression. "We all will be fighting and hopefully my plan works." "And what exactly is your plan?" Azawa asks. "I don't want to jinx anything, so you're gonna have to wait a while to find out," the now Greenite says with a smile. "In the battle I can already tell, All Might will be going up against All for One. Shigaraki will come after me. I'm pretty sure you can take on Shigaraki. That's we all think. There is more than what meets the eye. I don't know who said that, but it makes a lot of sense. You're planning on saving him." "Azawa-sensei, stop reading my mind," the boy says, pouting. "I don't have to, you're you." "That's how I know," the man says, shutting the boy up. There is silence between the two. one waiting for the other speak again. You know you can be free, Izawa says. You and Kaminari. No. I'm not going to drag him with me if he doesn't want to, but after everything I deserve to be put away. I looked up those you put down, Midoriya, the teacher says sternly. Those people are just as evil as All for One. No more. They deserved what was coming to them. So do I, the boy raises his voice. But not enough to wake anyone. Izawa looks at his student with sad eyes. Izuku looks away. You are also a victim in all of this, problem child. Izuku somehow missed that name. He remembered the first time his teacher used the name to encourage him, and he was happy he was doing it again. You know that no matter what you say, none of us are going to believe you're a villain. If you want to pay for your crimes after everything goes down, then live your life as the problem child you are, Izawa says, placing a fist on the boy's chest like he did once before. Izuku looks down. Thanks, sensei, but it's my decision to make, Izuku says with a smile, looking back at the man. Izawa just sighs. Is going to make sure this problem child gets what he deserves. And not what he think he deserves. Of course he can't forget the class Pikachu as well. The skies were black with smoke. Bodies laid sprawled under rubble and death. Once life-fueled eyes now closed and blank. Dull they were. Izuku stood among the carnage. Nothing but smoke filled the air. Nothing but heat of the flames all around held him. Nomus roamed the land. All for One had won. He was left with nothing. He was alone. He was all alone. Tears trickled down his cheeks. Tears and blood and pain. Izuku scanned the area looking for life. He then saw her. The love of his life, under dirt and ash. Izuku wasted no time. He ran to her. He didn't care that his left eye was gone, or the fact that his right leg was bent in the wrong direction. With whatever power he had left in his body, he dragged himself to her. To the girl that changed the way he looked at the world. To the girl that changed his name for him. The girl he loved with all his might. He reached her and dug her up and held her close to his bare and ash and soot-covered chest. Her closed and her breathing shallow. Izuku begged for her to be alright. He blamed himself for everything. He was part of this destruction. It was all his fault, he thought to himself. He begged to whatever god watching down on him to save her. To save Ichako Uraraka. The girl who never ceased to smile. The girl that was always able to make him smile and brighten his day. All he wants is to see her smile. He prayed and begged and wailed to see her well. He cried his heart out. He held her close. A soft hand brushed his cheek. He ceased his wailing. But the tears continued to stream down his one good eye. Smoke suffocating him. He didn't care. Flames burning him. He didn't care. The pain he was feeling was nothing compared to what he was feeling right now. Ichako was smiling for him. For him to stay calm. She was still there for him. She wiped away his tears. And smiled up to him. It was heartbreaking. Izuku closed his eye and held onto her hand. Izuku, her sweet voice came. Izuku opened his eye to see her. Even in all the dirt and ashes they were surrounded by death and flames, her beauty to him remained. She was the most beautiful thing in his eyes. She was his light in the darkness. She was what kept him sane. Izuku, her breathing and voice began to slow. Don't say anything. Save your strength, Izuku ordered, but his voice lacked comment. Ichako simply wiped away his tears and shook her head. A metal rod was embedded in her side. She only had a few minutes. Izuku's heart broke into more than billion pieces. And they were still breaking. Breaking and breaking. Even if they had become non-existent, they kept on breaking and breaking. Please don't leave me alone, Izuku begged. Save everyone, Izuku. Ichako held onto him. I don't know how you do it, but I know you can. Izuku, her voice held more command than the boy. Ichako used her strength to pull out something from her pockets. I was going to give one to you and keep the other one. She held lockets in her hand. She smiled softly and caressed his cheek. Remember, Deku, I love you. And your Deku means you can do it. I should have confessed sooner, she said with a light chuckle. Save everyone, Deku. I love you. Her hand fell and met the burning earth. Her eyes closed as her head laid on his chest. Izuku's world collapsed. He pulled the body of his love and held her close as he shouted and screamed and wailed with all his being. Save everyone. That's what he's going to do. He's going to save everyone. No matter what, no matter how. He will save them. He screamed with his being. He screamed and wailed as power filled his whole being. His hair glowed bright. A pillar of light shot out from where he was kneeling. For a moment he had forgotten everything as he was pulled up into the heavens by the power within him. He looked through and saw what looked like the universes. There wasn't an exact number of how many he saw. He saw beings watching him. He saw them. And heard their voices. You can save them. You can do it. We know you can and will. They were supporting him. Everyone was counting on him. Things begun to darken. The blinding light was now residing. And like that he was out. When he woke, he was on the roof of a building. He woke up with a start and scanned his surroundings. Everything was back. He could see with both eyes. And he was 12. He didn't care at the time. He jumped with joy. But then felt something in his hands. He looked down, saw it was the lockets. He remembered Ochako. He jumped and screamed with joy once more, knowing everything was back. But then he heard sirens. He looked down where he was and saw panic and mayhem. He acted quickly and used his quirks. The memory sealing quirk. All his quirks were still with him. He first took his home nation and sealed them away. Then he took the world's. Panic only causes chaos, he thought. With that done, he was ready to head home. He was smiling from ear to ear. He couldn't wait to see his mother. He couldn't wait to see them all. The gruff voice came from behind him. Izuku was in tears. He turned and saw his teacher. He doesn't know him, but he didn't care. He hugged him with all the strength his little body had. The underground hero was doing his rounds and then suddenly got a painful migraine. He saw a kid standing on a ledge. Only one thought came to his mind, and so he went to the boy. Carefully, not to startle him. He called out, and the boy turned and tackled the man into a hug. The man was taken aback. The boy then let go and looked up to him with a smile. And left him standing there confused. Aizawa-sensei, the man froze as the boy disappeared from sight. Izuku was running home. He was going to change everything. He couldn't wait. He wanted to his friends, his mom, All Might and everyone. He saw Bakugo walking home. He didn't care what he was going to say. Or do. He tackled the boy into a hug. And cried. The blonde tried to fight back but was surprised by the smaller boy's strength. Izuku heard a voice and turned. He saw his mom. His breathing hitched. His beautiful mom. The woman who was always there for him. The woman who supported him in everything he did. The one that was always on his side no matter what. The only reason he became good. Bakugo watched the boy. To him, Izuku looked like he saw someone come back from the dead. To him it was as though the nerd had forgotten everything he had done to him that day. He even hugged him. Izuku got to his feet. He fell to his knees. Bakugo instinctively tried to catch him. But Izuku was faster at picking himself up, but he stumbled and got up again and ran full speed to his mother. He hugged and carried his heart out. He didn't want to let go of her. This time he was going to save her. He's going to save as many as he can. He couldn't wait to his love again as well. Izuku walked upstairs to his dorm room where he had placed a sleeping Ochako. Even in her sleep, she was a beauty. A soft smile graced his sleeps as he climbed in with her. He placed a gentle kiss on her head. She was still asleep due to last night's fun and games. He took her hands into his and closed his eyes. He too was still tired from night's activities. Unknowing to him, Ochako was awake. As the boy drifted into deep sleep, she placed a gentle kiss on his head and nuzzles close to bask in his warmth. 1, 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 3. Aizawa counted as he drilled the aspiring heroes. All using nothing but raw strength to pull Mount Lady. They had gotten some heroes into loop and now they were helping with training. Those raising their physical strength were those that were long and mid-range fighters. It was torture. It was the training camp but at school. It was a weekend and all teachers and heroes were training the students. They alternated from pushing their quirks to the limit and then their bodies. As for Kaminari and Izuku, it was also the same. Except this Kaminari was made to go beyond and was going full blast on electricity that could kill even the strongest electric type. As for Izuku, he was going head to head with the man that had brought down the ultimate villain twice. Well, once now. Izuku was getting pummeled. All Might wasn't holding back. Make matters worse, he was going against two. All Might and Gran Torino. The self-torture was brutal. It was a million times worse than before. Shinsu, who had transferred into the hero course late, never went through this. But now he knew what kind of man his teacher was. The man sat at the top of Mount Lady's head as he egged on the others to move their ass. The top heads of the drifters were also there. Madame Rift had never seen such torture or even inflicted it. Anamori had fainted and Ryo and Guda were wondering if these kids were even human. As for Shiro, he had long disappeared. The white tiger could be seen going up against ectoplasm clones. He had went with a norm and joined the hell training. Screaming could be heard. The remaining drifters looked up in time to see their young leader slammed into the earth. Come on now, young Midoriya, is that all you got? All Might taunted with his smile. Full cowling. 1000%. The boy shouted and launched at his master. All Might simply used the boy's force on himself, slamming him into the ground. For the umpteenth time. As Gran Torino landed on him as a combo. A normal person would have been paced. Is there such a thing as normal now? The drifters wondered. What are you all waiting for? Asked the bear, dog, cat, mouse thing known as the principal of UA. The four looked at him confused. Your young friend had gotten the message, you all should get started as well, he urged. Well, they got kicked into it. By the end of the day, no one could stand. Every student and drifter that were there remained half dead in their place. By tomorrow they would go on to their internships and spread the word. And also do some serious work instead of being guessed. Time skip. Next day. Remember what you are supposed to do. Yes, sensei. They said, still feeling drained. Their eyes were lifeless. All of them. Their eyes were lifeless. Todoroki thought his training with his father was torture. This was on another level. He looked as though his spirit had left his body. Izuku looked just as dead. His first round with All Might was him passing out from complete overuse of all quirks was using. Not even his regeneration ability could hold up. Just as Izawa was about to finish up, sudden pain struck Izuku in the head. He felt as though his head was rotting away into nothing as his hold began to do the same. He let out a scream and everyone turned to him. The station went quiet and all eyes were on the black-haired horn boy. Akagami Izawa called as he rushed to the boy. Izuku was in tears. Another drifter was gone. The sword of death he just felt was definitely by the hands of Shigaraki. His classmates huddled around him, blocking off the view from onlooking passers-by. What is it, Midoriya? Izawa asked. Izuku removed his glasses and wiped his tears. The drifter was killed. All I can tell is that it was done by Shigaraki. I think they are targeting them, Izuku said with a shaky breath. Boss. Izuku instantly teleported away and grew his horn to an intimidating size. Izuku stood before Top Dog. Izuku glared at Shigaraki. It's you. Shigaraki shouted and charged. Izuku braced himself. About to charge only to be blocked away by a torrent of blue flames. Izuku and Shigaraki turned to see Dabi. A collar around his neck. Dabi Shigaraki snarled. Todoroki Tuya. Dabi looked at Izuku and gave a smile. Tell my family I'm sorry. I kinda got a bit too deep and now they have this thing controlling me. The man with burn said slyly with an annoyed smirk. Potato Face says it's not time for battle yet. But is right here, Shigaraki says in annoyance as he began scratching his neck. Hey, it's not me, Dabi says. Izuku watched the two interact. Dabi was standing in a manner he didn't usually stand in. The posture and everything was like him. All for one. Izuku tried read his mind. He blocked out. All for one was definitely controlling him. As the two were distracted with each other, Izuku shrunk the horn until it was gone and walked to Inugami. Top Dog. Picked him and teleported away in time for Shigaraki to notice. They were back at UA in Nezu's office. Endeavor was there along with All Might and Nezu and Recovery Girl. Izuku had explained everything to the Flame Hero so that he could cease the headhunt. Midoriya All Might questioned and then quickly realized his bleeding friend. Recovery Girl was already moving as she had Izuku lay the boy on the couch. She got to work quickly and treated the boy. Izuku turned to the others and looked at them. Izawa just called saying you went off somewhere after screaming in pain. He's already looking for you and here you are. Shigaraki attacked a drifter and he was with the one that died. Izuku had tears in his eyes. Boss. It was my fault at sushi, Inugami struggled to say. Stay still, you have to stop moving, RG urged the boy. The guy said something about kidnapping and Nomus. RG had enough and knocked the boy. Izuku's eyes widened in horror. They are going to target the drifters, Izuku said with panic in his voice. The flaming hot hand knocked him on the hand. Were you not listening, boy? Not just your little friends but also civilians, said Endeavor. Izuku looked up to the Flame Hero. He then remembered Dabi. Dabi was actually always on their side. Why would he have gone around burning and killing people who wanted to join the league by claiming to look for recruits? Izuku bowed his head at the hero. I'm sorry but I couldn't save him, Izuku apologized. Endeavor had done horrible things. He knew it and that's why he was trying to change. This boy before him gave him that chance. He didn't have to ask about what the boy was talking about. I will save my son. Did I promise, young lad, he says, placing a hand on the boy to reassure him. The flash and a click came and the two turned to see All Might in his skinny form and Nezu holding out their phones. Endeavor glared but All Might just lifted his hands trying to calm him down. I need proof so I can say what just happened, he says with a smile. But the young drifter's safe and to be interrogated later, Izuku went back to the station where Izawa was waiting. The man strangled the boy. So what do we do, boy? Gran Torino asked as he waited for Izuku serve the taiyaki. We wait and see if All for One will make a move, Izuku replied. Last time they sent a bunch of Nomus and Stain was still on the loose. Now he wasn't sure what was going to happen now. Let's have a bet, if there's an attack, then for the rest of the internship you'll be buying me taiyaki, Gran Torino told the boy. Izuku sighed and looked at the old man. Fine. You are going to win anyway. With my luck anything that can go will go wrong. Cheer up, I'm just messing with you. Now, Gran Torino said, getting serious. He began eating his food. What do you will happen in this round, he asks. I'm not so sure. Last time he broke out and laid waste to everything, Izuku told the retired hero. Well, that was after the kidnapping and then using me to destroy things, and then after I broke free from his control, Izuku added. Well boy, when do you think all this will go down? Considering by the amount of time that it will take make his army, I'm thinking about the end of this year. Izuku thought hard. He had an extra 2 years and so did he. So his army should be as great as the number of heroes around. About probably a third would be high-end nomes. Ever since he ran away from home, mass kidnapping had started as well. He spent his time looking for those missing people as well as building up the drifters. He remembered his first members. Those two had been taking phony heroes and villains. Gentle and Love Lover. That's her name, right? Izuku wondered. They were the first people Izuku revealed the truth to. And they became the first drifter members. Right now those two were busy spreading the word about the upcoming battle. Which means you all will be getting your licenses, Gran Torino said, snapping the boy out his thoughts. I guess so. Boy, it's either the end of the year or around the time that high-end Nomu decided to attack Todoroki. Izuku nodded in agreement. There was no telling when the battle will begin. Izuku's classmates were already spreading the word. Though Koyami, who interned with Hawk, seemed a bit agitated. Not towards the pro but towards the people that made the man turn to the villain side. Hawks thought he was having a kid intern at his agency. The kid didn't feel like a kid to him. He thought and felt as though he was with any other pro that had already faced off with villains. Well, the kid was in the class that survived the USJ attack. One of the most promising to become heroes. So Tokoyami-kun, aren't you going to ask why I selected you? He asked. I already know, the boy with the raven head replied. First you going to say we are both birds? Hawks was dumbstruck. That was what he was going to say. What the heck? He thought. Tokoyami looked around to see there was no one around and then pulled out a red streaked with black locket. Courtesy of Momo to hold the memories. Hawks, I'd like to show you something. What is a kid? Hawk said, trying to amuse the boy. Tokoyami opened the locket and the memories returned. At first the hero thought he was attacking him with pain that came with rush. He shot the feathers of his wings at Tokoyami, but the boy was expecting and simply had Dark Shadow go into armor mode. Hawks finally registered everything. He looked at Tokoyami with a wide eye and confused expression. My friend turned back everything and so now we are preparing for a battle. My job, and along with my classmates and fellow hero students, is to spread the word. The pro hero looked at the boy completely stunned. He was actually a pro in the body of his younger self. Hawk-sensei, you don't have to turn to the dark side now. Your dream for heroes to have easygoing days may come true if we win the upcoming battle. All the others had also told those who took them as interns. They hadn't gone to intern with those during their first round, but instead to those they went after they got their provision license. Except a few like Izuku. The police had their hands filled with looking for missing people. The heroes that were notified were now having their sidekicks do twice the patrols. They couldn't risk the villains gaining more nomus and losing civilians. The whole town had already disappeared mysteriously a couple years ago. They were all just biding their time. Training. Recruiting and praying all goes well when the time comes. Izuku walked with Gran Torino through the streets. He thought he was about to win the bet that they had, but he was right when a warp gate opened up in several places and Noma stepped out. All different from last time. Lady Luck was never on his side. Why am I not so surprised? Gran Torino said as he charged off. Izuku behind him. One of the Nomas had a message inscribed onto its back. Here's a sample of what awaits in the battle. The Nomas weren't like the ones from before. They were stronger. But they weren't much problems for the top pros and Izuku in the area. But it was hard keeping his cover. Slightly mixing one for all with his acceleration quirk. The battle was getting closer than he thought. The internships ended and all of CLASS1 sat waiting for their teacher. The man walked in looking the same as usual. We are still going to have the camp training and the exams. Since you guys are an odd number, Akagami will be going up against all of us staff members, he said, and the class just listened. This time around we will not have any handicaps. Which means we'll be going on you guys harder than before. Everyone will be paired up with their same partners except Bakugo. You'll be with Shinsu. Bakugo turned to Shinsu. Shinsu looked at Bakugo. Both nodded at each other and returned their attention to class. The teachers you'll be going against will be the same as before. Which means we won't fall for the same tricks, as Awa said with his signature grin. I'm expecting you all to pass time. Fail and you'll be going against Akagami for training at the camp. Akagami? As Awa called. Yes. He replied, slightly startled. No holding back you here, as Awa warned. Izuku nodded. Ashido lifted her hand and then asked something the class had also been wondering. Sensei, why are you still calling him Akagami, and why are you still keeping up the disguise with the horn and the glasses, she asked. I'm Akagami Kurenisk outside the dorms and elsewhere. I still need to keep my cover. Only the hero courses were told the truth, along with Hatsum from the support department. As for the glasses, I actually need them. My eyes are the result of the drawback from using Rewind. Iida was beaming happily in the back. Happy to share the Megain tittle with someone. There's really no point in the theory, you all would be better of getting the third year exams, so you all will focus your time on training. Akagami will help with strengthening your quirks. Sensei, actually the quirk I want to work on strengthening is yours, Izuku said, standing with a sly smile. Aizawa looked baffled. I also thought of something, I'll be giving everyone another quirk. What? Everyone shouted. Akagami, I don't think that will be a good idea, Aizawa voiced his concern. Actually, I never told anyone this, but you see, all for one, my all for one is a slightly different version. Instead of breaking the person and making them become brain dead or killing them when taking a quirk, I just make them quirkless. I helped some people who didn't want their quirks and took it from them. Now they are living happy quirkless lives. The same goes for giving a quirk. In other words, it's a complete version of all for one, Nezu says, popping out Aizawa's scarf. Everyone jumped in surprise. Well, Akagami-kun, what are you waiting for? Let's get started, he said happily. All of Class A stood outside in the training ground. All Mights and Midnight with them, as was Nezu. Let's start. Aoyama, the twinkling blonde, stepped forward to Izuku. Izuku walked around him, thinking what quirk would suit him. Then it struck him. Aoyama likes to shine and twinkle, so why not just make him look like a shooting star? Aoyama how would like to sparkle for the world to see, Izuku says, placing a hand on the blonde's shoulder. Next thing everyone knows, Izuku's hand is glowing, and then Aoyama as well. Then bright light came. Then came a boom. Blinding light like a shooting star shot through the sky. Everyone stared in awe. The star then started heading in their direction. Some started to panic, but Izuku just stood there with a smile. The star landed, creating a crater. The star sparkled and twinkled and then added, revealing a smiling Aoyama. Everyone jaw dropped. Aoyama Yuga. Quirk. Naval laser and shooting star. Shooting star. User begins glow and sparkle when activated. Gains enhanced strength, speed and flight. Drawbacks. Due to flight mode. User gains horrid stomach pain. Me next Deku. Bakugo shouted. No wait Aoyama, fight me, he shouted. Aizawa and the rest of the teachers stood in background, sweat dropping, and what was happening? They were letting their students become true monsters. Bushido was next. Izuku gave a quirk Archarnid, allowing her create spider-like limbs from her back. Are you trying to actually turn me into an queen? Bushido said as she looked down at all of them with a smile. You'll be my alien queen, Karishma shouted. Bushido launched at him. Karishma catching her as they laughed. As for Tsu-chan, Izuku gave her the exact ability to spit acid. Midoriya-chan, not very original, she commented. That's because you are already quite strong. Tsu-chan, I couldn't think of any other quirk that could suit you. Spitting acid, it would make a wonderful defensive and offensive skill then. Thank you, Midoriya-chan. Then came Bakugo. Izuku thought hard, Bakugo's patience thinning. How about I give you the quirk that I used against the sludge? Izuku shivered, but Bakugo grew a terrifying smile that shook All Might to his bones. Me Midoriya my boy, are you sure? The man asked. Shut it All Might, I want it. Bakugo said as he shook Izuku's hands. The quirk was called self-destruct. Wherever a handprint of Bakugo lays will self-destruct like a bomb when the boy wants it to. All Might believes he's screwed. Everyone bombarded him after. And they were no longer going in alphabetical order. Next person he gave a quirk to was Shinsu. Mimicry, Shinsu said, looking at him with dull eyes. I already have a quirk that people call villainous, and now you have me another one, he says. Lighten up, you don't have to worry about your voice changing mask when people figure it out, plus you have a wider variation of sounds you can mimic. The boy thought hard about something, then got an idea. Shinso turned to the empty part of the field, took a deep breath in and screamed. What came next was present mix quirk-induced scream that shattered glass and tore up the ground. No, as always slumps. Yes, Shinso says with a smile. For Kaminari, Izuku gave the quirk called Converter. To put it simply, it converts his electricity into speed and strength. He could also turn his body into electricity and travel through cables. Aizawa took out his phone and decided to tell the other staff members to train themselves. These kids were becoming monsters. As for Karishma, Izuku gave a shock absorption quirk. The more he gets hit, the force is turned into a destructive energy when he lets it out. When building it up, red electric sparks danced all over him. I'm fat and without the fat, he joked, and everyone burst out laughing. As for Todoroki, Izuku gave him a manipulation quirk. Now he can control all ice and fire instead of just emitting it. Izuku upgraded Yaoi Rozu's quirk. Another aspect of his quirk. Usually Aoi Rozu can create anything inorganic by knowing the chemical structure, but no, all she has to imagine what it is. Which means she could easily create weapons out of sci-fi movies. And so she tries it out. She creates her gun that can make things explode. She shot a tree. The tree was no more. Disintegrated. Gone. She dropped the gun and hid behind Todoroki. Please destroy it, she squeaks. Bakugo wasted no time and made it self-destruct. No weapon like that should exist. Izuku turned to the teachers. Don't worry, I'll also give you guys quirks, he said with a thumbs up. Everyone else got at least an upgraded version of their quirk or a completely different one. As they began practicing their new quirks, he began with the teachers. They had a choice in it. Some declined but a few accepted. As for Izawa, he wasn't given a choice. So what quirk are you giving me, Midoriya? Izuku just smiled and gave his hand. The quirk that breaks the limit. Limit breaker, it's time you broke your limits. Izawa gives his smile and took the boy's hand. You bloody problem child, I see your plan now. Let the exams begin, All Might called out. The first Present Mick and Jiru Koda team. Jiru. Present Mick got a new quirk called Amplifier. It just makes whatever sound he makes louder. Which mean his scream is twice as loud. And a clap will sound like thunder. Will blast you back and deafen you at point blank range. Jiru got a quirk called Siren. She can turn her voice into a weapon. Well, she just turned into a mini Present Mick with a higher pitched voice, plus the stereo speakers on her calves, channeling her heartbeat just added to her arsenal. Everyone in the monitoring room listening in had to block out their ears. It was a battle of sound and voice. One thing about this quirk users is their ears are stronger and so they can withstand their own sounds. As Present Mick was busy battling Jiru's voice with his own, he didn't realize what's sneaking up on him. The bull almost the size of All Might stood behind the blonde man. Koda Kauji can shapeshift into whatever animals in existence, but will have enhanced strength, size and speed. An army little big small animals surrounding him. Koda the bull let out a puff. Present Mick turned around. Rip, Present Mick. Koda charged at the man and threw him in the air. The pro came falling down only to get picked up by birds and have all sorts of animals attack him. Everyone turned to each other in the and noted not to mess with the two. Next match was Mina and Kaminari against Nezu. Nezu decided to stay single quirked. Last time he was in a crane, this time he was nowhere to be seen. All of a sudden an army of 0 points and other robots popped out of nowhere. But they weren't like the ones at the exam. A screen on a 0-pointer flashed on. Hello students, let me introduce you to these battle bots I invented myself. They are made to withstand any kind of quirk and so have fun, the rodent said. He laughed crazily. Are you kidding me? Both Mina and Kaminari shouted as they ran for their lives. The two tried to take out the robots. Just like Nezu said they made to counter quirks. Kaminari, we're going to escape, Mina shouted as she scooped up the boy and used the giant spider limbs to jump over the 0-point robot. I'll hold them back and you get out of here, the girl said, tossing her most powerful acid at the pillars of a fake metal building. They came crashing down onto the robots. The robots crawled out without a scratch. Idiot. No. Karishma will have my ass for that. The boy shouted. But it was too late, the girl had already begun swinging him. Kaminari thought he might be sick. Mina was just about let go when all of a sudden Kaminari grabbed her, instead converting all his electricity into strength and throwing the girl to the exit. Ladies first way. He says, giving a thumbs up as he falls. Bushido lands outside the gate using the spider legs to catch herself. The gate announces them passing. Nezu catches Kaminari with a robot and smiles happily to see his students groan. That's the man, Karishma shouted and fist pumped the air. Next was Mineta and Zero against Midnight. Zero got a quirk that allowed him to stick to walls. He noted he was becoming a Spider-Man. Stop going to another universe. Izuku had shouted at him. Zero tapes his mouth with flex tape. As for Mineta, his quirk was upgraded. He can make the balls on his head explode and cover up an area. Perfect for setting a trap and suffocating people. And perfect for capturing people. So the match ended quickly with Mineta capturing Midnight, not giving her a chance to try out her new quirk. Everyone jaw dropped while Izuku was laughing his head off. Uraraka and Aoyama was up next with 13. Uraraka got a gravity amplification quirk. So anything makes floats, and then she can amplify the gravity and make the object come crashing down like a comet. 13 choice to stay single quirked. The battle ended quickly this time with Aoyama doing the pinning and Uraraka snapping on the cuffs. All in all, the matches were ending with the passing. With some different results from last time. Ejiro and Iida captured Power Loader. The pro got a quirk allowing him to manipulate steel. Ejiro's new quirk Armor. A transforming type quirk allowing him to grow unbreakable armor plates on his body. As was upgraded. He also had engine added onto his elbows like his brother. They somehow overpowered the pro and cuffed him. Hajiro was thankful they didn't have to do that embracing escape plan from last time. Shoji and Hagakure also passed. Hagakure quirk was also upgraded. Now she can whatever clothes she's wearing invisible by will along with whatever she touches. Works great when you have invisible weapons now one knows about. Though being invisible didn't quite help when the pro you're going against got a quirk that allowed him switch his sight to different modes. Snipe got a quirk that allowed him to see in the dark and infrared. As for Shoji, he got a simple enhanced speed and strength quirk. Breaking a steam pipe blocking out Snipe's vision and gaining against him with a head-on battle. As Hagakure made her way out. Though Koyami and Asui versus Ectoplasm. Though Koyami gained the ability to travel through shadows and manipulate them. It helps to fully recharge Dark Shadow plus with his ability to create weapons from the shadows, it became a battle on two fronts. Ectoplasm got a strength quirk. The result was the same as last time. Satu and Kirishima versus Cementus. Satu got a speed quirk to match up with his strength quirk. Cementus had his quirk upgraded. So they were fighting against a monster cause the pro used the cement to cover himself and became a monster. How they passed. Satu kept pounding Kirishima really fast and really hard and tossed him at their monster teacher and had him release all the power. Cementus not expecting that and got knocked out. Now only 3 matches to go. All Might versus Shinsu and Bakugo. And Aoi Rozu and Todoroki versus Izawa. Izawa has a big surprise for his children. The monster of man will now show what happens when you break your limits. Aoi Rozu and Todoroki walked nervously through the fake suburban area. Their teacher wasn't going to go easy on them in this round. And they didn't know what quirk he got. All they knew was that their teacher was part of Midoriya's master plan to bring down All for One. They walked nervously hand in hand. They promised never to let each other go. Last time Momo let Todoroki to go fight on his own because he told her to stay behind. Little did they know that was the last time they saw each other. This time they promised if they were going to go then they would go together. Momo had an arsenal of different weapons that were non-lethal but still dangerous on her. Todoroki was ready to ignite at any moment. And that's when the man appeared. For a second the couple thought it was All Might, but they were dead wrong. Black energy sparks crackled all over the pro clad in black. His hair down but scarves raised. Todoroki instinctively threw an ice barrage at the man. Believing he would dodge the attack, Todoroki stood in his place. But his plan and choice backfired as a powerful force throws back the ice at him. Using his manipulation quirk he stops the ice. Todoroki and Momo stared in fear as they saw their teacher had destroyed the ice barrage with a single punch. A grin grew on Izawa's face. As Todoroki yelled out Momo run. In the viewing room. What have you done my boy? All Might asked in fear as they watched the match. Izawa was a one-man army of destruction. Everyone stared in fear. What quirk did you give him? Deku Bakugo was shaking. Hachin, are you okay? Izuku asked sounding worried. No fucking dipshit, you turned our fucking teacher into a monster. Midoriya, what did you give him? Mineta shouted. Limit breaker, Izuku told them sheepishly. It breaks the limits that hold you back. Sensei is now or possibly stronger than All Might if it comes to strength and speed. If you add his agility and skill then he can probably beat him. What does that do to his original quirk then? Mina asked shaking to her bones. With Limit Breaker he can erase a quirk permanently, Izuku said with a serious tone. He won't use it for the match. Yaoi Rozu and Todoroki right now are going to have fight against him or escape. The drawback of Limit Breaker is that it will only stay for a certain period of time. Take All Might for example. Right now Sensei can use Limit Breaker for 2 hours. That's like forever in this exam, everyone shout. Izuku was sure he was going to go deaf. They watched as Izawa cornered the two. Todoroki shot another barrage of ice. Izawa broke it once more. Yaoi Rozu Pav. Midoriya is really hell-bent on taking down All for One. Shadow is still covering for me. No. If any let this happen again. Sensei is as strong as All Might. I'm not going to let that stop me. Shadow and I have already defeated him and we are going to do it again. Shadow. I call out. He turned to me with a confused look. I grabbed him by the hand and dropped a small cube that I made. It was a bomb. But not lethal. It will discharge enough electricity to shock a giant. But the new quirk Izawa Sensei has, I'm not sure if it will work. He doesn't seem to be using Eraser. There must have been a reason to why. With that I'll use it to our advantage. I grabbed Shadow and started running. But the upgrade of my quirk, my drawback also grew. I can only make a few weapons that don't exist before I'm out. But I won't let that stop me. I won't be the insecure girl that failed everyone anymore. Third person Pav. The battle continued. The teacher present along with Izuku smiled at Yaoi Rozu's development. She wasn't the same girl as before. She was stronger. She calculated faster. Even Todoroki was surprised, but he couldn't be happier. They both worked together as one. Momo created what looked like a cannon and fired at Aizawa. Todoroki used ice and fire keeping him away. Aizawa was surprised. Even with this new quirk, these two were keeping him at bay. He decided to get serious. Faster than All Might, he appeared before Todoroki. The blow to gut sent the boy back, but something was off. He didn't feel his hand connect with a person but a metal. With everything in his body broken, the man can see far, hear, smell and so forth. What he just rammed his fist into was no person. He went to the boy that he blasted back and saw a machine. The face of Todoroki, but it had a gaping hole in its chest and was going haywire. He felt the change of temperature and looked above him. Icicle shards, both great and small in the millions, hovered above him. He couldn't spot the real Todoroki as the icy hell rained down him. With his speed and strength he dodged and destroyed the attack. He jumped back from where he came. Yaoi Rozu had been firing randomly before. Next thing he knew, a fire dome enveloped him. Were they trying to trap him? Well, they were doing quite a shitty job, he thought as he lifted a finger up to the center. He was stealing his student's move as he flicked his finger and powerful wind pressure blew away the flames. That was my Midoriya's move, shouted Kaminari and Izuku in shock and surprise. Everyone was too stunned to see anything. Izuku was honestly not expecting that. Even if it was for a greater cause, he had created a monster of a teacher. With the battle leaning on either sides now, everyone watched intently. As the inferno disappeared, Aizawa found himself surrounded by what looked like spikes lodged into the ground. That was when he realized it. He jumped into the air as electricity was released, creating a force field around where he was. More ice came flying at him. He dodged and grabbed on them and then flipping of them as they got close to the ground, and that's when it happened. Todoroki clamped a quirk suppressor on him. He was out. He turned to see Todoroki picking up a Yaoi Rozu. She was completely out. He then finally noticed that it was only Todoroki was attacking and she had seen through everything. He had already failed when the test began. He also noticed the two were never that far apart. In the viewing room everyone cheered with joy. Even Izuku, cause he didn't know who would win. Todoroki took Yaoi Rozu to the infirmary and waited for her to wake up. It was now time for Bakugo and Shinsu. Everyone wasn't sure how this match would turn out. Now with the boy who can now mimic any sound and brainwash, as well as the boy who can be a ticking bomb and create a minefield anywhere. What kind of teamwork would these boys show against the #1 pro? What kind of teamwork would the two pull off, everyone wondered. All Might was a man who talked. And now that Shinsu could mimic any sound, he somewhat felt screwed. Along with the fact that he can copy present mix voice quirk. He wouldn't be surprised if he had copied Jiru's voice and added it to his arsenal. As well as Tyler heartbeats that she amplifies through her boots. He had to keep his mouth shut at all times. He wondered where young Bakugo had placed his handprints. They could be anywhere and could go off at any moment. These weren't the rookie heroes he once trained. These were actual pros in their teen bodies. All Might, shouted Bakugo. The man turned and time block out an explosion. The man almost said something to the boy, but then he saw the mask the blonde was wearing. Flashback. You'll be the main force, said Shinsu. And what will you be doing, Bakugo asked, sounding irritated. Since I'm not much of a brawler, I'll back up while being in the background. And another thing. You should wear a mask so that All Might won't be able to see your mouth, said Shinsu with a grin. Bakugo got what he was saying. When facing an enemy you can't beat through brute strength, using your head would be the best option. Confusion, distraction, misdirection and irritation. It was time to beat muscle with brains. Bakugo said a couple of things that he thought All Might would reply to. Flashback end. All Might shut his mouth quickly. Bakugo created another explosion. The smoke blocked out the pro's vision. All Might tried to listen for the boy, but he couldn't hear anything. He found it quite uncharacteristic for the loud hot-headed boy. But after going through the hell they all went through, of course it changed them. When the smoke cleared, Bakugo was gone. But dread crept into All Might. He looked around and saw numerous glowing handprints on top each other. They glowed their brightest then. Boom. All Might managed to leap into the air. When he did, he saw the familiar purple head. All Might could see the boy taking a deep breath. He couldn't find any footing to change directions. Shinsu let out Mick's loudest scream. Shouting. What's up? All Might got blasted back. While blocking out his ears. The man went through a building. And that was when Bakugo was heard once more. However, he didn't know whether it was Bakugo or Shinsu. He couldn't find them either. It was as though their voices echoed of the walls. Hey All Might, what do you think about this new fucking skill Deku and Dunce face taught us, said Bakugo coming from the right direction. Who knew learning how to hide your fucking presence would come in handy, the boy snickered, the voice coming from the left. All Might ran to the direction of the voices but found nothing. He was the one playing villain, right? He wondered. All Might ran down a hallway only to find more explosives. The man crashed through the wall, leaping out onto the street. in time to get the full blast Jiru's new quirk. The high-pitched scream shattered glass and cracked walls. All Might had his hands up to protect his ears. The man rushed behind Shinsu, but the boy was already turning around, tossing what looked like marbles to his face. They were glowing. Shinsu leaped back quickly as the marbles exploded, leaving dust and smoke to surface. Everyone watched in the viewing room. They were in awe of the second-last battle. It looked as though they were toying with All Might. "What's going on here?" Karishma asked. "Shinsu and Kachin have no chance to beat All Might in strength and speed. So they are using their brains to take him down," said Kaminari. Jiru snorted. Everyone turned to her with confused eyes. "What was so funny?" Kayaka-chan asked Asui. "No, it's just what Kaminari said. I know he dropped his mask, but still what he said," the girl bursting out in laughter. Beating him with brains, they all thought. Finally getting it as they laughed at how ironic it was. "What the hell, Midoriya, help me out," Kaminari shouted. He turned to the greenite. The boy was holding his sides while laughing. "Oh, All Might couldn't see anything. To throw explosives right in the face, seriously, he thought. He stepped back. Warmth was beneath his foot, burning hotter. It was an explosion. It was a minefield in there. The pro leaped out into the sky. He felt something wrap around his ankle. He looked down and saw the white scarf. But strength that only beat Bakugo's, the man was pulled crashing back to earth. All Might now knew that teamwork was now second nature to this class. "All Might, aren't you going to say something? Are you going to try and save that fucking handyman?" All Might couldn't see, he gritted his teeth. It was thanks to him Deku was kidnapped. "Why are you trying to save the fucking bastard? Is the reason why everything went to shit." All Might didn't know which was talking. He couldn't see anything through the cloud of dust and smoke. And they were seriously getting on his nerves. He bolted out the smoke, right on time to be met with Bakugo's most powerful explosion. The man was blasted back. Further than before. It was bigger and hotter and truly more lethal. He felt something slither around him and tighten. As if that would hold him down. He thought. He pulled in Shinsu. The boy came into view, but had an unsettling grin on his face. He let out a voice attack of Jiru once more at the best. All Might didn't have time to dodge. He knelt down trying to protect his ears. He knew they were bleeding. The pain attacked his mind. He thought it would split. He dropped when the sound stopped. He was defended. But not completely. He could faintly, almost not completely, hear Shinsu saying they passed. The teachers in the viewing room was baffled. As was the rest of the students. Izuku stood with a smirk. Going through hell and back together can make some powerful bonds. Bakugo and Shinsu, when they entered the makeshift city, already had their plan into motion. They weren't going to escape, they were going to capture the villain. Like before, All Might was near the gate. The man believed they would escape. So he met his guard up around that area. All Might failed the moment he stepped foot into that city. He had the thought it was an exam running through his mind. Shinsu and Bakugo, however, had the mindset of it being a battlefield. The images and memories of losing their friends and family were still, no matter how long time passed, would remain fresh in their minds. That alone lead them to succeed. That alone would help them protect their friends and family. Now it was time for Izuku's battle with all the pros. The long-awaited battle. Though there had to be the ruining moment when the whole class decided to have Momo make beanbags and break out pre-prepared snacks to watch the show. All pros check. Izuku stretches. Warms up. Point A ready. Izuku cracks fingers. Point B set. Izuku twists. Joints loosening, satisfying pros can be heard. Point C is a go. Every student in CLASS 1A waits in anticipation. Point D. The gates to the mock city opens up. All teachers waited for their plan to fall through. They knew Midoriya was going to be a challenge. They learned from their battles with the others. This time they were taking this battle as though it was real. They forced themselves to believe they were going up against All for One. In fact, they really were going up against All for One. Point A. Ectoplasm came running. Nothing but him. It was an army of them. Izuku used One for All and broke through the incoming force. But the clones kept coming. With Ectoplasm's new quirk, he was giving the boy a beat down. Izuku grew his horn. He could tell which was the real one. The real one was not in the area. He was the main strategist with Nezu, and so he knew the pro was most likely in another area giving out orders. He crossed his hands of his chest and then threw them aside, releasing a blast of energy crackling black and green. All the ectoplasm clones ceased to exist along with the building in a 10-meter radius of the boy. Everyone in the viewing jaw dropped. Food coming out their mouths. Izuku continued walking. The horn now same size as Eri. He walked and next thing he knows he's being engaged in a battle between a giant monster made of cement and another of steel. Izuku flipped back trying to avoid getting hit. These teachers were serious. He wouldn't be able to heal quickly if he got hit with one of those punches. These teachers were acting as though they didn't just have a battle with the others. Then he remembered. He facepalmed. Eerie. The little girl was aiding Rikori girl the whole time. Nai-chan finally realizes the little girl says as she sits on Yoraka's lap, as the said girl had burst out laughing. Izuku flipped back and landed on all four. The moment his fingertips touched the ground, spikes shot up from the earth and rushed to the Cementus and power loader. But the moment it reached them, the spikes broke as though the two were indestructible. The boy's mouth hung open in surprise until he realized the pink gas surrounding the two. Izuku flipped back more and retreated. Midnight's new quirk allowed her to extract any gas that can do what she wants. Enhance her strength and others was just one little thing her gas could do. That was point B the boy and walked into. He had yet to see what the others had for him. Sadly he walked straight into the part of town he will soon regret for probably the rest of his life. Point A simple enough for some folks to figure out. All Might and Izawa. The moment Izuku stepped foot in Point A flash of black could be seen. Within seconds the fist of the man clad in black drilled into the boy's stomach. The boy spat blood and was sent back crashing through more buildings one could count. Dust filled the air. Boy dropped to his knees but stood up. He felt something coming from behind him. Next his spine has broken. The boy let a pained scream. His regeneration ability now working full blast. There was a flash of yellow and Izuku knew that it was All Might. Don't hold back Midoriya. Izuku remembered his teacher's words. He pushed away the pain and finally got serious. Green-black lightning crackles all over him. The pros suddenly felt heavy as though a force was pushing down on them. Izuku's eyes began to glow wide as he opened them. All the quirks he had in his arsenal were activated. It was a miracle his body remained and not deformed like how All for One was. All Might and Eraser had charged. Both threw their fist at the boy but it was blocked. They only managed to make the boy take a single step back. I will pass like everyone else, the boy said with determination. The blonde-haired man smirked as did the one clad in black. The two started duking out punches the boy was miraculously blocking and evading. All Might managed to connect his fist in the boy's face that sent the boy back. Izuku sensed a slight static pulse and charged in its direction. All Might and Eraser head went after boy. Izuku's plan was take of the head first. Ectoplasm clones came out and began attacking. The boy was spot on. Battle bots started heading out. Like Nezu had said, they were built to withstand any quirk. But that didn't mean they were indestructible. The boy wasted no time in destroying the robots. Izuku knew he wouldn't be able to take on all the teachers at the same time if they were this serious. It was already hard getting away from Izawa and All Might. The kid broke into the room in which Ectoplasm and Nezu was. They were the ones strategizing the whole thing. The two were captured instantly. But before Ectoplasm was caught he pushed down a button. Don't underestimate us, the pro said and disappeared. This Ectoplasm was also a clone. Now it was only Nezu that was caught. But it was okay, the main brain was gone. Izawa and the limb were hot on Izuku's tail. Izuku turned and met his foes. One for All fired up as he launched and punched his predecessor in the face. Shot a roundhouse kick at Izawa, but the hit was blocked. The man's scar floated up ready to catch the boy. Izuku teleported away only to get a static shock that shook him all the way down to his cells. He looked around and saw that the whole city was caged. Something to prevent him from teleporting. That was what Ectoplasm had activated. Now it was going to be difficult. With all the clones, the man can inform the others without using anything form of communication devices. He'll have to give it his all. Nai-chan looks like he's in trouble, said Eri looking worried. That's how Izuku is, Achako said with a smile. It looked sad but yet proud. Very proud. Deku doesn't want to hurt the teachers and yet he wants to pass and so he's planning it out carefully and not going berserk. Achako thought back to the battle between All for One and Izuku. He had gone berserk and that caused a whole lot of destruction. But she knew with all her heart that Izuku would pull through and find a way. Time was running out for Izuku. It was time to kick up a notch. If All Might or Izawa comes for him, he'll eliminate them by capturing them. It was bound to be hard work. He was only given one cuff. But he could duplicate it. Unlike living things, duplicated inorganic objects will remain even after the quirk is deactivated, and so he had made a cuff for each teacher. He'll have go full on All for One to capture everyone. Ectoplasm can wait. Too many of him is confusing. In the viewing room. Midoriya looks like he's having a hard time, Karishma says sounding worried. Ectoplasm will be the challenge because with this open space he can spread out that the real one could be anywhere, says Recovery Girl. Asui and Tokoyami nodded in agreement. Tokoyami had sat behind her and had his cloak wrapped around the frog girl. It was cold and he was keeping her warm. They were at the advantage because where they was a closed-in space and they could spot the real ectoplasm making the clones. Izuku decided to try and use the quirks he hadn't gotten the chance to use yet. One for All still at 100%. The boy focused on his eyes, and through a camera his friends could see that the veins around his head to his eyes began to bulge, and the moment he opened his eyes, his emerald green hand turned to a lime green that looked like a compass. Everyone in the viewing room gasped in awe. Unknowing to them, some other people had joined them. Namasa, who came to report, the big three, and Night-Eye. Izawa and All Might attacked from behind, but the boy saw it even though he was not looking. Izuku took hold of Izawa's fist and used him as a weapon against All Might, like how the man once did to him with Bakugo. Iri said excitedly. Deku used it to save me. With it activated, Deku can't see in a 360 degrees angle. His radius is 10 meters, she explains. Did Midoriya-kun try to turn Iri-chan into him, thought Mirio. Izuku was about to snap the cuffs on, but All Might grabbed the boy by the leg, accidentally crushing his bones and flinging him aside, breaking through concrete walls and more. Izuku didn't scream out in pain, but he was sure in a whole lot of it. His foot was mangled. Everyone, even though they couldn't hear anything, felt sick. His leg quickly snapped back into place, looking as though it wasn't twisted by a drill. This was the fastest regeneration they had seen. Iri began to look scared. Iri, what's wrong? Ichako asked. She looked back to the screen in time to see the love of her life bite down on his own hand. And drink up his own blood and then swallow the chunks he bit off. His hand healed instantly, and appendages that looked like tails grew out over his clothes on his lower back. That quirk is called Ghoul. It's a cannibalism type quirk. Deku took it from a boy that was the same as me. He was born with a quirk that wasn't in his family tree. He begged Deku, and so did his parents, and so Deku took it. It okay as long as Deku doesn't use it, but it activates when Deku's regeneration ability is too slow to save his life. Everyone looked at the little girl in awe. She was really smart for her age. Oh wait, she's 9 years old, but in the body of a 6-year-old, they remembered. What happens if Izuku stays in that form for a long time? Ichako asked. Deku could go berserk, and he might end up eating the teachers, Iri says, a bit scared. Many holds their stomachs and mouths with fear-struck faces. Others had shocked expressions. Hearing this, Recovery Girl made an announcement to the teachers. To all the teachers, up your guard, Akagami has been pushed onto the fence. Akagami, because this will be recorded in the UA school files. The teachers tensed up. They managed to push the kid this far. They just have to hold him off a bit longer and the kid fails. How long they were fighting they weren't sure. They checked the time. 10 minutes left. It was almost time. But they were wrong to feel relieved. Present Mick, who had been guarding the gate, was second to fall since Nezu was the first. He got whacked across the road and collided with a bus before he even had time to register what was happening. Sniper was also guarding the same area, fired countless rounds, but the boy appeared before him quickly and kicked him in the gut. The man left the ground, and the boy's tails, Iri called Kagyun, threw the man against a bus, this time flipping it on its side. Everyone looked shocked. The amount of force the guy put could have killed Mick and Snipe. Recovery Girl was right when she said on the fence. The automated system announced the pros retiring from the match due to knockout. Recovery Girl took Iri quickly and some other students to aid her. That being Ichako, Bakugo and Kirishima. Bakugo and Kirishima just in case Izuku completely tips over on the side. Mirio and a couple others followed just in case. Scratch that, the whole room emptied out. The whites of the boy's eyes were black and compass was still active. Izuku used one for all and ran to the mock city. His sense of smell was stronger, and with his other sight's quirks active, his eyes looked like a complex machine. Weak point. The quirk that allows him to see the weak point of anything and everything. He found Midnight. And before she could even react, Izuku shot a knee to her stomach. The woman buckled over and she was out. 7 minutes left. Our loader and Cementus began attacking. He found their weak points and used his Kagyun to rip their cement and metal body apart. Izuku grabbed Cementus that slammed him against Power Loader. The power was bone crushing and the two laid passed out. He had thrown them into a building that was now collapsing. Izuku head began to pound. He wanted this to end. He wanted to destroy things. The thing his father made him to be was coming out. He screamed out in agony for whole area to hear. In the far off distance, All for One could sense his son. The struggling the boy was going through. The power he has wants to be let out. They want to be free. He smiled gleefully. He may have not lost his secret prize possession yet. The pounding ceased, but Izuku's eyes began to bleed. His Kagyun began to become uncontrollable. His senses multiplied by 10. He finally found the real ectoplasm charging towards him with an army of clones. Izuku flashed past the fakes and grabbed the man's head and slammed him into the ground. If the pro hadn't been given a straight quirk, he'd be a gunna. Recovery Girl commanded the rescue mission for the teachers. This was not a drill. She sent the students out to look for them. Izuku was tilting far over the fence. This had truly turned into a rescue mission. Recovery Girl couldn't do anything while they were unconscious, and so it was Eri who was doing the healing. Recovery Girl, a new quirk was called Checkup. Basically, she can tell what's wrong with a person by simply touching them. Snipe's spine and ribs were broken. Eri started with him quickly. The pro returned to how he was before the fight. But he was still unconscious. Nick as well, his back was damaged and was suffering from internal bleeding. With Recovery Girl and her working together, everything began to look up. Eri had gotten over her trauma long ago and had practiced her quirk with Deku. She mastered her quirk and she was going to be a hero. Her eyes filled with determination. Mirio noticed the look in the girl's eyes and smiled proudly. But it was best to subdue Izuku at the moment. 5 minutes left. All Might and Aizawa were the last remaining teachers. This wasn't going so well. Izuku pushed them to use the upper limits of their power. And now they were almost worn out. They had the equal amount of time left to use their quirks as did the time for the exam. And their worst nightmare couldn't have come true at a better time. A smile had crept its way on Izuku's face as his eyes looked at them in glee as tears of blood trickled down his cheeks. Izuku had fallen off the fence. All Might charged and as did Aizawa. Izuku began to cackle. This was bad. Izuku had gone berserk. Everyone was scattered looking for teachers, some of them went to help the 2 remaining teachers. Eri's horn was gradually growing. But she was almost done. Midnight had internal bleeding. As did ectoplasm. Uraraka and Ichako managed to get Cementus and Power Loader out before the building collapsed on them. 11 bones broken in Cementus plus internal bleeding and 12 broken bones in Power Loader, also internal bleeding. The blows Izuku gave on the teachers damaged their internal organs. Their ribs cutting into some of them. They were glad they didn't die. But All Might and Aizawa. The automated system announced the 2 retiring due to knockout, meaning Izuku passed the exam, but they were still going at it. Aizawa is running, All Might wrapped up on his back. Their time is up and All Might is gravely injured. He took the beating when Izuku kicked him away. He would have been dead if it weren't for Limit Breaker. It broke the limits of his body after all. His natural healing turned into instant regeneration for the last few seconds he had and saved his life. But now he was back to normal. His time was up. Willing himself to use Limit Break would destroy his body. That was the drawback of his quirk. His body would break down and he'd cripple himself. Of course Eri can turn him back, but like hell he wants to experience that. All Might, who was going in and out of consciousness, knew without a doubt the boy was stronger than All for One. All Might used up his time. He still needs to save some of whatever power he had left for the final battle. Aizawa collapse and then Izuku appears before them. This is it. They both thought. They cursed themselves for being horrible teachers and not being able to save their students. The boy chuckled darkly as he charged at them. A fallen power cord laid sparking beside the 2 men. They braced themselves. Izuku on his onslaught. All Might and Aizawa, now willing to force themselves to use their quirks, were ready, but suddenly. Lightning crackled from the sparking cord and shot out, blinding everyone. Electric fist met the green boy's face, throwing him back. Haminari stood before the 2 pros protectively. The 2 bloody heroes, who had blood dripping from their heads, were dumbstruck. "And guys, get back on your own, we're going to try and snap Midoriya out of this," he told the pros. All Might tried to stand but fell over, as did Aizawa. Man clad in black was sure his femur was broken. He also knew a couple of ribs were broken and collarbone, and his right arm was broken. How he was able to run from Izuku was a mystery, and he knows he most likely have internal bleeding. He can feel himself losing his grip on consciousness. All Might was no different. He knows for sure all his limbs were shattered. His jaw as well. He feels as though his wound had opened up. Haminari knew for sure that the 2 were incapable of getting away quickly, and he can't protect them while keeping Izuku at bay. The said boy was already rising from the rubble. He was the first one here because there were real power cords everywhere. He converted his body and found them first. Izuku began to charge. He launched at the boy, but he made a grave mistake. All 4 of Izuku's extra appendages went after the pros. He can't react fast enough and he can't discharge because they could get hurt. "No. Not now," he begged. All Might and Aizawa could see their lives flash before their eyes. "No, wait. It's a sparkling laser." They were dumbstruck once more. The laser cut through the Kaguns. Izuku screamed out in pain and fell back. He snarled up at the sky. In the sky was the pro's saving grace that was unexpectedly Aoyama. "Aoyama, take the senseis to Eri quickly." "Miwai." Aoyama dropped down. Then picked All Might and Aizawa gently and flew back at moderate speed as not damage them more. All Might and Aizawa were surprised by the blonde. Usually he'd hide and cower away. Then they remembered what happened to him. Aoyama was done with the cowering. Because his loved ones died. And he lived through watching the horror. He wasn't going to be the same anymore. Even though it scares down to his very cells. He will not hide, he will not doubt his strengths again. All Might and Izawa were already unconscious when they had arrived at Eri. She quickly went to the two and began working on them. The 6-year-old girl do not falter. Living and training with Deku helped her become who she was. Izuku charged at Kaminari. The blonde was having a hard time with the cannibalism quirk still active in the Greenite. He kept him at bay long enough, but he slipped. The razor-sharp appendage came from the side ready to slit his throat. But then, a fist connected with the berserker's chin. Izuku was thrown back. Tape wrapped around the boy and threw him up to the sky, and an explosion blasted him back to earth. "We will not allow you to destroy yourself," Midoriya Mirio shouted. All for One smiled. Whenever his son goes berserk, a mental link is made. He can see what the boy sees and whatever he says the boy does. This only happened when Izuku went berserk. He was All for One tool of destruction. He still has his claws sunk deep into the boy. "Kill them, my son," and with that the boy charged, cackling as a madman. But all of a sudden a blur of purple rushed by him. "Capturing move. Grape Rush," Mineta shouted. And finally Grape Cloak. Mineta threw 2 balls and it exploded, enveloping Izuku. The boy struggled to break free. It was heavy and restricting, he couldn't move. Izuku screamed and his horn grew. The purple cloak withered away to nothing. "Oh come on." The boy whined. "Don't get close to him." With that quirk active, you'll age and turn to dust, Namasa says. He had arrived at the scene, as did the rest of the team that was there to subdue Izuku. He took out his gun and fired a couple of rounds. The bullet stopped mid-air and turned back on them and fired back. The two were to slow move, but luckily Kirishima jumped in front of them and took the blow. Red tiny sparks danced over him. "Just need a bit more," he said and gritted his teeth. Icicles came crashing down on the Midoriya, but he dodged them as though he saw them coming. And indeed he did see them coming. "We have to knock him out somehow," Namasa says, reloading his gun. "We can't get close to him with that quirk active though." "What are we going to do?" Mineta shouted. "We can use me as a weapon," Ajiro chips in. Everyone looks at as though he has a death wish. "Midoriya explained to me about my new quirk. It's not just simple armor or any type of armor quirk. Apparently it's an armor type quirk that can defend against all types of quirks. He even showed me. He activated the acceleration quirk and held my hand when the armor quirk was active. It didn't do anything to me." "I thought you just got a normal quirk," said Ishido. "Yeah, it looked so normal I didn't think much about it," said Zero. "If you have nothing nice to say, that please don't say anything," Ajiro said with an irk mark forming on his head. "Fucking numbskulls, focus!" Bakugo shouted and landed next to them. "He'll curl up like into a ball now." Ajiro listened but was confused. With his armor activated he looked like a boulder. Then he realized what was happening, but was too late. Izuku charged and Bakugo blasted Ajiro towards him, shouting, "Combo move. Exploding armadillo." "What the hell?" Ajiro shouted as he went spinning. He closed his eyes and just went with the flow. He felt the impact with something. He didn't know what, but he just kept on going. Izuku blocked with his hands. There definitely snaps and the rolling ball was still going. He redirected the onslaught only to have it come back to him, running over him too to be exact. "Sorry Ajiro-kun, but your idea to be a weapon is working while the others are preparing for the final blow," Mirio stated proudly as he was the one that blasted back the boy. Ajiro said nothing. He was trying his best to stay in the shape, while focusing on making his armor stronger. Koda came charging in the form of a bison. A really huge bison, and butted back the boy to Izuku. Izuku saw this coming and created a ramp, sending him up to the sky. Blinding light shone in the middle of the day and the Ajiro came back spinning down on the Greenite. "It's my time to shine," came Aoyama. Izuku was grounded. Literally, but he was still moving. He got back up. Iida kicked the rolling boy back, but he went of course. Todoroki created curved walls of ice, redirecting Ajiro, and encased Midoriya with 4 pillars of ice, making Ajiro bounce off them and coming back at Izuku. "What the hell is with the pinball game?" Kaminari shouted. "No, I just..." Todoroki sweat dropped. He just felt like trying it. "One more, blast Ajiro this way," Kirishima shouted. While they were busy dealing with the Greenite, the others were pounding on Kirishima till black and red sparks danced over him in waves. "Alright, here it goes," Bakugo shouted. "Howitzer impact." Exploding cannonball. Ajiro was definitely sure he was going faster than when he said armadillo and he felt a second blast. And he was sure he was going faster now. Then he finally felt impact. He felt he was slowing and finally stop. He fell to the ground. He was completely out of it. He can't activate his armor of lift a limb, but even so he lifted up his head to see. Kirishima stood with his whole body hardened and black and red sparks crackled all over him. "Ajiro, you're a real man now, leave it up to me," Kirishima shouted. Ajiro gave a weak smile and let his head fall. Shaoji picked him up and began running. They all did and Izuku began charging. The boy was slower, and when they were far and Izuku was inches away from slitting Kirishma's throat. The boy let it all out. Blinding light came from where Kirishma stood. And the shockwave that came blasted everyone back. In the safe zone. The students taking care of the teachers had to hold themselves and teachers down. Tamaki was sure that was Kirishma. Eri was almost blown away, but had clung onto Izawa. She was trying to hold him down. Asui managed to hold them down. She looked around and noticed someone was missing. Izuku was still standing. His clothes were ripped. He definitely took damage. His horn was long and still glowing with power. But he held Kirishma by the throat. The boy was passed out from the blast he released. Izuku's other hand was at his head. The pounding had come back. The voice in his head telling him to end the boy he was holding. Telling to crush his throat. But he didn't want to. He knew he'd regret it. He was trying his best to fight the voice in his head. He didn't want it there. He didn't want to listen to it. He wanted it to stop. Everyone rise from the rubble. They were all hurt in places. Some bleeding heavily as they looked on in horror. One friend was unconscious at the mercy of another as another was struggling with himself. Did we do it? Kaminari asked. Not yet, he still has Kirishma in his grip, Iida said, sounding worried. He tried to move, go Repiro burst to save his friend, but pain shot up from his leg. It was broken. He cursed as he gritted his teeth. Shut up, shut up, shut up, Izuku started screaming. Everyone was confused, but a thought struck Mineta. What if All for One was controlling Midoriya all this time? Everyone turned to him, surprise and realization. But they needed to focus on what was in front of them. Kirishma's life hung in the balance. Izuku was fighting with the voice in his head. He didn't want to hear it. He wanted it gone. He'd give it what he wanted if that what it would take for it to disappear. His grip tightened on Kirishma. But before he could end it, he felt warmth. Focus on my voice. Izuku Uraraka had appeared behind him and had her arms wrapped around him. The boy dropped Kirishma and fell to his knees as he melted into the warmth. The voice sounded angry but was fading. And then it was finally gone. Izuku fell back and finally went limp. The voice that broke him out the first time had returned to break him out the second time. I came right on time this time, Izuku Uraraka said with a smile. Everyone started gathering round them. Relived smiles on everyone's faces, though some were in pain and unconscious. Bushido was holding on to and crying her heart out on Kirishma. Thanking Ichako for arriving in just the nick of time. Heroes are meant to be fashionably late, she chuckled. Indeed, Aoyama said. He still had his sparkle even though blood was dripping down his forehead. All for One gritted his teeth. He was so close to getting back his weapon. It was that girl's fault, he thought. If that girl was out the picture, then he would get him back. If the girl died in front of him, then he would lose it completely and become his mindless doll. She had foiled his plans before, bring back the boy, and have done it again. The simple solution to the problem was eliminating the girl. He smiled. He will get his son back. Izuku woke up with a start. He looked around and a number of people were in bandages and looking like mummies. He too looked like a mummy. He couldn't remember anything. What happened, he asked. He felt like he was subjected to a pinball game and he was the target. You were subjected to a pinball game, Recovery Girl said. Eh? Izuku said, confused. You lost control of your quirk, but don't worry, Eri was able. Everyone. Well, mostly the guys with serious damage. She didn't heal them all the way though. Their bodies need to heal naturally. Izuku looked at her with horror and shame. Oh, don't worry now, you're not at fault. Surprisingly, Mineta put together the fact that you were being controlled. We did some checkups and it seemed when you go berserk a mental link is connected to, we believe, All for One. Izuku looks at her on shock. Miss Uraraka managed to bring you back, she says with a smile. Your feelings for each other is far stronger than All for One's hold on you. She's my saving grace, I guess, Izuku says with a slight blush and a smile. Midoriya. Izuku jumps in shock from the choir of voices. His classmates started flooding in. Half of them having bandages. Aoyama had it around his head. Bajiro was a mummy. Chaoji, Satu and Kaminari on their hands. From pounding Kirishma. The said redhead was also a mummy. Recovery Girl told Eri to just rewind our injuries to a non-threatening state. Though most of us didn't go as far as that, just the teachers, Ajiro stated. Izuku looked like he wanted to ask about how he got mummified. Please don't ask, Ajiro told him. We came up with a new special combo move everyone can do with Ajiro, Kirishma says, excited. Now we just have to train until he's resistant to nausea. He shouted excitedly. Ajiro, what happened? Izuku asked. First Bakugo turned me into an exploding armadillo, and then Todoroki used me as a pinball, and then Bakugo turned me into an exploding cannonball, he simply said. He still got beaten all over the place, even with his armor activated. Of course he'd look like a mummy. I'm sorry you guys, it's all my fault, Izuku says solemnly. Not exactly, Izawa's voice came. He was mummified and so was All Might. Never thought I'd go through again, but anyway, the fault falls to me and All Might. As Eri had said, the cannibalism quirk activated when your regeneration quirk can't save your life in time. We took it a bit too seriously and overestimated your abilities. We didn't know you were holding back on purpose. Forgive us, young Midoriya. All Might apologized. It's my fault for not giving you all a heads up, Izuku says, also apologizing. Well, now we all know how to fucking defeat you, Bakugo says, getting everyone's attention. Chako and Izuku ask at the same time. The exploding blonde went up a greenie and whispered it into his ear. The whole already knew and were snickering. Izuku's face turned red, rivaling Karishma's hair, and steam came out his nose and ears. Deku, do you have a fever? Chako asked, leaning in to feel his temperature. What Bakugo told made him look all over the place, and his eyes accidentally landed on her chest. His poor mind overloaded and he passed out. His classmates began laughing their heads off as Chako began panicking. The teachers had finally come to and smiled at the scene. They can't blame their student, but they were definitely blaming their colleagues. And as for Nezu, well, the principal was enjoying the scene with the rest of the teachers. It's just that he had a smug look on his face as he drank his tea. Out of all them, he came out without a single scratch. Izuku was told start taking meditation classes. Him and Bakugo because of his anger. And Izuku to try and help control himself. And for some reason Izawa was the one supervising the lesson. The two had try and stay calm while everyone in class annoyed them. They were seated cross-legged on a high post. Keeping calm under pressure shows great self-control. Challenge each other in self-control. Midoriya, how quirks did you say you can have activated again? Izuku had always believed he was using all his quirks when was fighting, but sadly it was just 25% he was using. In order to defeat All For One he has to go 100%. 25%. Izuku let out a disappointed sigh. He can't control neither of the two most powerful quirk in the world that he still has. The only reason why he's able to control one fire all at 100% is because his regeneration quirk had been active all the time. It was the reason why he can't battle for a long time. He'd run out of stamina. And energy then, that would occur. Izuku shivered and cursed himself about the battle with the teachers. Any longer and he could gone berserk everywhere. Izuku doesn't know this, but he had created a lifeline that pulls him back whenever his goes berserk. If he loses that lifeline then there was nothing to stop him. That lifeline of course was Uraraka Chako. The shopping and gathering of supplies went fine. Shigaraki didn't show up to chat with Izuku and everything went smoothly. The UA students should have been glad, but that itself was unnerving. There was something very wrong going on. After tucking Eri in, Izuku sat on his bed thinking about the feeling in his gut. There was something very wrong. Something bad was going to happen. He really wished he had a premonition quirk. Heck, he doesn't really know how quirks he has. All For One had passed on a copy of all the quirks he had to him, he only had a couple of true ones that he had taken. That was another problem. The quirks he had were copies of the ones he had taken. They were bound to not be as strong as the real ones. He needs to learn how to control all quirks he has. He looked over to the sleeping Eri. He needs to protect people like her. He needed to protect his friends. His brief meeting with Shigaraki Tamura back when he was heading to Hosu just showed how deep the man has fallen. He wasn't sure he'll be able to save him. He needed to clear his head for a while, and so he had dressed up in his drifter gear and headed downstairs to get a cup of water before leaving to go the base and see what his fellow drifters know, also to tell his teacher he was leaving. The moment he did and everyone saw him all geared up, they went on the defense. Zero taped him and Mineta added an extra layer of his grape cloak or coat or whatever. Izawa sighed as Izuku fell to the floor. He forgot they were still not used to him wearing his villain gear. Izuku activated an ice quirk and easily broke through his bindings. Deku, can please try not to give us a heart attack, Uraraka said as she let out a breath of relief. You're heading out? Izawa asked. I'm just going to head to the base and see what everyone had dug up, Izuku replied. Don't be late, then I'm not waking up to let you in, came the man's griffin reply. Please, I can teleport. I got no need for doors, Izuku smirked but got strangled by Izawa's scarf. The boy didn't surrender but instead teleported out of the situation. Izawa got pisses, but then something crosses his mind. He hides a sinister grin that crosses his face as he slowly fades into the background and calls someone. He will have his revenge. For some reason Izuku decided to leave through the front door. Uraraka following behind to say her a couple of things before he left for the night. You know he's planning something terrible for you, she tells the boy. The green in his hair becoming more visible with each passing day. He was starting to look like the old him. Just not the stuttering mess he once was. I know. SS shit, I'm going to die, he says shivering. Nah, he's still the stuttering mess. He's just good at pretending. They stood there in silence for a while. The door was closed. There was all sorts of shenanigans going on inside, but the moment it was just the two of them. The Chaco took Izuku's hands into hers and placed them on her cheek, feeling their warmth. She knew the boy was struggling with himself. "Izuku," she began softly. The boy looked down, hiding his masked face. "I know it's hard and things are going to get harder. I can see you're doing your best," she said with a smile as she lifted up his chin. She slowly removed the boy's mask, revealing glistening emerald gems. No matter what age or timeline, she doubted the man she loved would ever stop being a crybaby. She giggled lightly and wiped away his tears. Being with the Chaco alone allowed him to show how he truly felt. He felt frustrated and hopeless. The girl pulled him in until their foreheads touched. Both had their arms wrapped around each other. "Izuku, I want you to believe in yourself," she says. Her voice low and soothing. And that was it. Izuku didn't believe in himself. It felt better to believe in someone else. He can't trust himself. He doubts his abilities every time he has the chance. Chaco saw this was what was holding him back. This was the reason to why he can't get to where he wants to be. He has to believe in himself. She looked him in the eye and urged him to tell her his pain. "I can't trust myself. I'm afraid I'll just end up hurting you and everyone," he says painfully, biting back a whimper. "We all believe in you, Izuku. We know you are strong. You can overcome this." She pulled him into a hug and let him melt into her warmth. "We are all here for you. And we will always be here. You gave us that chance. You are the reason why we are stronger, so believe in yourself. You are stronger than you think you are." Izuku looked at her in the eyes. Her eyes sparkles in the light as she smiled at him with a love-filled smile. It was just the two of them. Only the two of them. Everything was silent as they gazed into each other's eyes. Literally, it was quiet. Not a single sound, and then there was an agitated shout. "For the love of all things good in this world. Kiss already," Mina shouted. Everyone has been watching them. And it was getting really good, but these seriously they didn't want to wait. "When did you all get here?" Uraraka shouted, surprised. Izuku was no exception. The boy was a blushing mess. "Oh come on, if was getting really good. Why did you stop?" Kaminari whined. Izawa won't say it, but he was disappointed. He'll never admit it, but he likes cheesy romance movies and what's better than real life. "Okay, back with you all," Yamomo says, coming to the rescue. They all whined and complained but went back in. Todoroki, for only God knows why, gave a thumbs up to his friends and went in. Well, it seemed directed to both of them. Well, Deku have a saw. Uraraka was cut off by Izuku placing his lips in hers. It was soft and chaste but sweet. The boy quickly retracted and flashed her his sunshine smile, donned his mask and was gone within a second. The brunette was at a loss of words. Her first kiss was stolen cheekily. She didn't have time to register, and when she did, her permanent blush went darker as her face went scarlet. "So how did it feel?" the pink one says, materializing behind her. "Hi," the girl screams in shock, fear, embarrassment, joy, well, a whole ton of emotions at the same time, and passes out. Izuku teleported straight into the drifter base. Alarms went off like crazy, and heavy machine guns appeared at all corners of the room, with lined up missile blasters in the wall. Izuku screamed as he dodged the missiles launched at him in a panic. Next thing that came were bullets, and he ran around the room like a madman, running for his life. By the time the weapons were gone, Izuku was half dead from the shock and fear of being riddled by bullets. He thought it was all over, but it wasn't. Flamethrowers appeared and blasted the poor teleporter. Izuku laid half dead on the floor. "Tatsugawa Ryo, a man to be feared," Izuku said, trying to get up. "Boss," Ryo shouted, running out. "I'm sorry, I should have connected you and told about the base," he said, helping Izuku up. "The whole building is rigged. So that no one apart from a genuine drifter can enter. All the teleporters and those that come in through the windows and walls and stuff to get here have to be verified, otherwise what happened to you will happen to them," he explained. After setting Izuku down, he began to scratch his neck nervously. "There were 20 casualties. Madam almost killed me, along with Gentle, who was trying a stunt with his quirk." Izuku Pav. Tatsugawa's quirk was called Tech. It allows him dissect and build different types of machines. He's always thinking about new ways to make things. "I bet he would love to meet Hatsum. Should I introduce them?" "No, all hell will break loose. If I bring him to UA, he and Hatsum will destroy the school. If I bring Hatsum here, they will destroy the base." "Say boss, the last time you brought us to UA, I wanted to meet one of the students there. I didn't get the chance though cause we had to leave," Ryo told me. "Should I bet it's Hatsum?" "What was her name again?" the lengthy skinny blonde-haired man said, doing his thinking pose. Hatsumo, had him. He was thinking really hard. "I got Hatsume Mei-san," he said, finally remembering. "Oh no. I saw her inventions on the sports festival, and I got a message from your principal asking me to build something to help you with all your quirks," Boss Ryo said excitedly. "Where is everybody?" I asked. Everyone is doing their own thing. Aiki-kun went out on patrol, Hanamori-san is with her family, and Guda should at a bar somewhere. Madam got intel on human trafficking and went to check it out. Okay, now this definitely piqued my interest. I can see you are interested, Ryo says, ruffling Izuku's hair. Third person Pav. He told him the place and instantly Izuku went there. He appeared right next to the woman scaring her. Boy, would you please give a warning next time, the tall woman says, threatening to strangle him. Ryo said, you got information on human trafficking, Izuku asked after gaining numerous bumps on his head. Yeah, our little mafia group was able to come across the information by chance. The drifters are already a villain organization in the eyes of the public, must we make a mafia? Izuku asked, not sure if he made the right choice. Please, it's nothing but a network of information, trading weapons, no drugs are involved, and we are gaining more recruits through this, plus we are making money. Tell how you going to rebuild your place without insurance. Izuku felt like retorting but was shushed. It was a low-key group mainly used for information gathering. They are making a move tonight. Would like to lead the infiltration or would you like to watch? Madam asked the boy. Izuku had been cutting down on his violent activities, mostly taking down other villains, and it seemed as though the crime rate rose. He would love to lead another hit, but at the moment he thought about his school life and he got orders from Izawa to not do anything. Just check in and get back. He doesn't have to worry about traders or whatnot within the drifters because of the marks given. He can take it back just as easy as he can give it. Anybody thinking about being a traitor, he will know under a second. Some of these matters happened before, and when Izuku got the reasons, he judged it good or bad. If it was good, he erased all memories of anything to do with the drifters. If bad, he erases the memories and takes the person's quirk and turns them into the authorities. All drifters knew of this. They knew the consequences, but didn't find them harmful. You can do your own thing as long as it doesn't hurt the group in any way. However, things like blackmailing innocent people, senseless murder and so forth was a no. Red card. Do it and you are immediately at the mercy of the Drifter King Faceless. I'll watch and intervene if necessary, Izuku told the woman. Madam Rift then opened up a portal on a wall. They both traveled through Izuku, becoming invisible. Drifters were gathered around. Daiki, Hanamori and Guda as well. Inugami also in the crowd. Was Ryo left out? Izuku asked Madam Rift. He was busy playing with his toys, plus his quirk isn't anything physical. He's an important asset that needs to be safe. Izuku is currently imagining the blonde-goggled man with a wrench in his hands. True. His inventions are useful. Stay behind and try not to get caught, Madam Rift warned, and went to meet the rest of the drifters gathered. Izuku fell back, activating his silencing quirk. Everyone was dressed for battle. Ryo had made special vest for everyone. They were bulletproof, yet they felt like normal clothes. Well, normal leather jackets. Yep. Even if the whole school building was on the line, his gifted mind and quirk would greatly help the heroes. The reason why he became a drifter was because his inventions were said to be a danger to society, and so he was shunned from many support organizations. If only he went to UA. Nezu would have been delighted to take him in. Making him a teacher for the support department most likely. Maybe he should after everything. Izuku thought. You all know what to do, right, Madam asked the crowd. The drifters all gave their answers through shouts and gestures. There was going to be blood tonight. They were all in a warehouse, and Izuku watched from the shadows. Black vans started pulling up, and then one more vehicle pulled up. 4 vans and a black sports car. The man, who was thin as a toothpick, pale as the dead, wore black from head to toe, with angular face, slick black hair, and ruby eyes, looked like a modern-day Dracula. Drax. Madam Rift greeted the man. Himeko-chan, it's been so long. All drifters raised a brow. Himeko? They all thought. Madam Rift was one of the most secretive women in the group. I have what you ordered. They were all freshly picked, some of them have promising quirks as well. Buffers came out from the vans and opened the doors. Dragging out man, woman and children. All recognized because their faces have been posted all over the city and broadcast all over the nation. Izuku gritted his teeth. Some of the drifters as well. The calm and collected were being tested, and as they tried not make it obvious that they trying to hold back the hot-blooded ones. Madam Rift felt sick. Instantly Madam drew a blade to the man's neck. And growled. Who are you working for? The man simply chuckled and clicked his fingers. What looked like glitching appeared in numerous boards around the room, and from it wanted criminals appeared with sick grins plastered across their faces. You were always soft little sister, always siding with the losing side, the League are bound to win this upcoming war. Drax said as he began to glitch and disappear and appear with the other true-blooded villains. Master told us about the little group his son created, and so we decided to cut down on some of your numbers. And with that an all-out battle began. Hanamori and others with defensive quirks and weapons protected the hostages. Hanamori sprouting giant tree roots from the earth creating a shield. Daiki and Guda were known as the beast duo in the Drifters. Daiki Shirlin his tiger form and Karabe Ashi Guda whose quirk was known reptilian. Madame Rift went straight for Drax. The woman used a blade-like sword as did Drax. Both had warping quirks. And the man did call Madame by her real name and he called her little sister. Izuku felt like jumping in to help, but a glare from Madame told him to stay put. She knew that he might get in trouble if he gets caught within this fight. Madame was notified about what had happened during the UA exam. About Izuku losing control and All for One controlling him. She didn't want to risk it now that she knew her brother was here. Since childhood he was always a bad apple, and with his quirk, he could take the boy to meet his father before he knew it. How protective you've become over these little pests, Drax taunted. Side with us, sister, together we can be stronger than anyone. I'd rather stay where I stand, Madame Rift shouted as she blocked her brother's blade. She pushed back, twirled like a graceful ballet and swung her blade ripping Drax's fine suit. Izuku watched the battle and clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. He was thinking that one of these guys would call for help, but they fighting without notifying him. This was the reason for the marks after all. After this his seriously having a talk with everyone. He was so grateful Ryo's vest were working well. The villains were going down one by one. The battle was tipping in the Drifters' favor. Izuku thought he could relax, but then it happened. An ear-piercing scream of pain came and Avirion froze. Everyone looked to the source and found Madame Rift. Her right arm severed with the blade still tight in its grip as she clutched her wound with her left hand. The villains took their chance, struck the Drifters where they stood. Hanamori's defense broke as the villain that attacked kept on kicking her as though she was a rag doll. Shiro was suddenly stabbed. The wound was severe. Slowly but surely the Drifters were falling. Drax held the blade to Madame Rift's throat. The woman gritted her teeth and glared down at the man. I must tell you the truth before I let you depart from this world. I am the mastermind behind your family's demise. As he moved to slit her throat he never got the chance. The battle stood still once more. Now all the villain were shivering in their shoes as they laid eyes upon who had saved the madam. Faceless. Izuku Midoriya turned his head menacingly towards Drax. Hello Izuku Midoriya, Drax said with sickening smile. Izuku firmly held the blade with his hand. And beastly growl came from the boy. Leave now, or I'll show what a villain like me can do. Izuku accidentally let out a shock wave of energy that blew back those without the drifter mark. Another thing the drifter mark can do. If just in case an enemy took a drifter hostage. The drifter mark will nullify the other's quirk against themselves, so the other drifter can strike the enemy. Without hurting the other. That if the quirk is an emitter type. However, the other drifter must keep a mental image of the drifter mark on their mind, so not to hurt the other taken hostage. Quite a handy quirk. Drax many against one, don't fear an impudent brat, Drax spat. The villains all cracked sickening grins, and so Izuku decided to show what an impudent brat like him can do. But one for all, the all too familiar sparks danced all over him. In an instant he was behind Drax. He had long discarded the mask. His once dyed black hair was back to its original highlighted green. His freckled face stood out, and for the first time for many of the enemy, they could see the true face of Faceless. But the single kick the man was embedded into the wall. The speed and strength was just like All Might, many thought. All drifters began to cheer for their leader. Next moment Hanamori and the hostages were in the drifter base. All drifters were in the drifter base. It was now Izuku against all the villains. Drax rose from the rubble. His once fine suit now tattered like rags. The villains slowly gathered around him. It was now all on one. The villains charged, but it was like flies being drawn to flames. Every kick Izuku landed was a knockout blow. Every punch sent them flying. Compass active, he could see all around. Taking so many a time. Drax appeared behind him and slashed. White pain burned through the boy's back as he stumbled forward. A hulking villain punched Izuku, sending him flying, crashing through the wall. The area outside was deserted. A rundown port area. However, it wasn't far from the city. Face it, boy, you're no match for us if you're holding back, Drax taunted. He was right. But Izuku didn't want to give All for One any chance of gaining control over him. Believe in yourself. Izuku remembered Ichako's words. With his back already healed, he stood up straight, pushing all the concrete rumble of him. Alright Ichako, I'll try it out, he said to himself. Are you ready to give up, Drax asked. Some of the villains were laughing at Izuku. I bet you know the reason I hold back, Izuku asked. Master gave me my memories and so I know, Drax said smugly. I know what kind of monster you are. If you don't want any more invent blood on your hands, then why don't you join me, join us. Just submit quietly and everything will be fine. There was silence from Izuku. Drax mistook the silence as contemplation. A grin grew on his face, thinking he had struck gold. That was still the light chuckles of the boy echoed through that now silent night. Not a villain made a move. Not a single one made a sound as an eerie feeling filled the air as the cold ocean breeze washed over them, sending a chill down the ice spines. Izuku began to laugh. It sounded so innocent, like that of a small child. "Everything is going to be fine," Izuku asked as he laughed. "If I hand myself over, the whole world itself may end." The boy stretched out his hands and looked to all the villains with the most manic smile he had. Both hands began to glow. His right glowed with 9 colors illuminating the darkness around them, as his left seemed to glow with black light. It was darker than the shadows around them. "I have 2 of the most powerful quirks on this planet, do you really expect me to hand myself over? But that power you could rule over all then." "I never asked for power, and I am not like you," he shouted out. Drax flinched slightly as he drops his smile. His expression replaced by a scowl. "I treasure my friends and family and perfectly fine with the world I live in. If you want me to go all out then so be it." Izuku began to glow, and wind suddenly surrounded the boy. The pressure he begun to let out froze many of the villains in place. "I can't waste my time here, I have friends and family to protect. Come at me with all you got," the boy shouted out. With new determination burning in his eyes, Izuku wasn't going to lose to anyone. Not to these villains, not to All for One or Shigaraki, and absolutely not to himself. That's it guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. See you in the next part.